Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Timothy Jones Jr. As a child, Timothy witnessed hardships in his family. His mother suffered from schizophrenia, and her mental health gradually declined. Eventually, she had to leave home to receive constant care. When Timothy was 20, his father moved with him to his grandmother's house. There, Timothy faced domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcohol abuse. Despite his difficult upbringing, Timothy showed an aptitude for mathematics and computer engineering. He could solve problems easily and take apart and reassemble computers to make them run faster. However, things changed when Timothy reached his teens. At age 10, he began hearing voices in his head. By middle school, he was using drugs and drinking excessively. At age 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident that affected the frontal lobe of his brain, the area that controls impulses and is associated with mental illness. After the accident, Timothy exhibited unusual behavior and was very irritable. He felt jealous of his father and believed that anyone who had a relationship with him was causing his father to neglect him. Over time, Timothy believed that his father did not love him and feared being abandoned. Although his intelligence developed, his emotional development was affected, causing him to have a childlike mentality and lack of empathy. After graduating from high school, Timothy Jones Jr. dreamed of joining the United States Navy. His intelligence helped him to study there, but he lacked athletic ability and discipline. He lasted only a few weeks of training and often cried out of frustration. He had difficulty keeping up with the rigorous requirements, which led to depression and a drug test that revealed substance abuse, resulting in his expulsion. In 2000, Timothy began associating with people involved in bad activities. Police found him in possession of illegal narcotics and writing checks in his father's name. The police forced Timothy's father to control his son or face arrest himself. In 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sent to a work camp in an Illinois state prison for a year. When he was released, he seemed to have changed, with religion becoming the main driving force in his life. Timothy met Amber while they were both working at an amusement park in Chicago. After a while, in 2004, he invited her to his church. Within weeks, they decided to marry, in keeping with the church's expectation of immediate marriage. Amber was 19 and Timothy was 22. However, Amber soon learned about the strictness of the church. Women were not allowed to cut their hair, wear pants, wear makeup, or wear jewelry. Additionally, Timothy believed that women should submit to their husbands and bear children. Timothy was very religious and devoted to the church. Although many advised him not to take the Bible literally, he persisted. They soon had 3 children, Mara, Elias, and Nathan, each born a year apart. As their family grew, they moved to Mississippi. There, Timothy graduated with highest honors from State University, earning a degree in computer science and engineering. Timothy Jones Jr. was building a family while working multiple jobs, and his family was extremely proud of him. With a promising future, Tim was truly a talented man, and everything seemed to be going well for him. He had secured a job at Intel as a computer chip manufacturer, which his wife, Amber, saw as an opportunity for a better life. After living in student housing in Mississippi, they dreamed of a larger home to raise their 3 children and even considered hiring a nanny. However, things did not go as planned. Timothy bought an old mobile home on a dirt road in Red Bank because he dreamed of living on a farm. He purchased animals to raise, and Amber stayed home to care for them. By 2012, they had 2 more children, and problems began to arise. Timothy wanted Amber to homeschool the children, even though she only had a high school education. Amber felt lonely and isolated, with no family nearby and Timothy's family far away. She felt inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. The tension in Timothy and Amber's marriage increased when Timothy accused Amber of having an affair with a neighbor. Their marriage began to fall apart, and they started to consider divorce. Timothy did not want Amber involved in the children's lives, so he sought the help of a therapist and asked his divorce attorney to declare that he was capable of raising the children alone. Amber, without a lawyer and unsure of what to do, decided that it was best for the children to stay with their father. She felt she had nothing to provide for the children, as she had no job or education. Ultimately, the court decided that Timothy would have primary custody as the sole financial provider, and Amber would be granted regular visitation rights. After leaving her husband and children, Amber faced many difficulties. Meanwhile, Timothy began to lose control and suffer from his failed marriage. He started using drugs and alcohol again and struggled with the voices in his head. He became easily angered over small things. Amber recounted that Timothy once beat her in front of the children until she passed out. Unable to manage work and family, Timothy hired a nanny service to care for the children. The first two nannies found Timothy's house very clean and noted that he was dedicated and attentive to the children, but their attitudes changed when they learned about Timothy's condition. On the third occasion, Timothy hired Crystal, a 17-year-old nanny who had a young daughter. Timothy gradually developed feelings for Crystal, and she soon became his lover. Timothy began to pressure Crystal to follow his religious customs, including wearing long dresses, growing her hair long, and being submissive to him. However, when Crystal refused, their relationship deteriorated. Crystal later spoke of how Timothy was too harsh with his children. He forced them to stand on their toes for hours, believing it was good for their weak bodies. Crystal eventually left after witnessing Timothy trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal left, Timothy hired another nanny. The new nanny noticed a major change in Timothy's home. Once clean, the house was now littered with trash and dirty clothes, and there were even cockroaches. Over time, Timothy became increasingly violent and punished his children daily. He imposed a restricted diet, feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day and limiting them to one meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina Social Services to report conditions at Timothy's home. She described the lack of food and physical abuse the children were subjected to. In fact, the violence was so severe that teachers had reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had previously required Timothy to sign a non-abuse pledge, but the children came to school with bruises and provided evidence linking them to the violence. On the afternoon of August 28, 2014, Timothy picked up the children. At the time, he was very angry about an electrical problem in the house. Timothy took his anger out on his 6-year-old son, Nathan, and repeatedly made Nathan bend down to pick up sand as punishment. Every time Nathan slowed down, Timothy hit him with a belt. While Nathan was being punished, Amber, Timothy's ex-wife, called to talk to the children. She made several calls until Timothy answered at 7:10. During the conversation, Nathan told his mother about the punishment for breaking the outlet, claiming it was an accident. Timothy angrily hung up, telling Amber to stop defending him. After hours of torture, Nathan was exhausted, dehydrated, and begged for it to stop. He passed out, ending it all. Timothy took Nathan to bed and left him without giving him water or help. Call records show that Amber called 8 more times after that. Around 1 a.m., Timothy took his 8-year-old daughter, Mara, to a convenience store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. When he got home, he strangled Mara. Timothy then went to his 7-year-old son, Elias, and did the same thing. He then unbuckled his belt and strangled Gabriel, 2, and Elaine, 1, until they stopped breathing. When the children did not move, he took a blanket, wrapped each one in it, and placed them in the back seat of the car and drove away. The disappearance of Timothy and his children was reported to the police. The police searched everywhere for Timothy. Fortunately, a police officer stopped his car. As the police approached the car, they immediately detected a foul odor inside. They also noticed that the carpet appeared to have been recently cleaned with bleach. The sheriff asked the driver, Timothy, for identification and license plate number and observed that Timothy appeared to be under the influence of drugs. After checking Timothy's information, the police discovered that he was wanted in South Carolina for a child welfare issue. When asked about the whereabouts of his children, Timothy initially said he had no children, but later mentioned that he had 3 children living in South Carolina. The officers asked for Timothy's relatives' phone numbers to verify the children's safety. After making the call, they immediately arrested Timothy. As Timothy was placed in a patrol car, he became emotional and began telling officers what he had done to his children. He confessed to killing his 3 children for ulterior motives. Timothy explained that he felt very sad and angry when he saw one of his sons playing with an electrical outlet, so he strangled his son until he lost consciousness. Timothy did the same to his other son and his older daughter. He strangled his daughter until she turned blue. In another account, Timothy claimed that his son was trying to hurt him when he saw him playing with an electrical outlet, which prompted him to kill him. In one recording, investigators heard a discussion about Timothy Jones Jr. subjecting his 6-year-old son, Nathan, to hours of punishment. This was because Nathan had accidentally turned off an electrical outlet in the living room. Timothy said he put Nathan to bed afterwards, but when he checked on him, he found him dead. When asked why he did this, Timothy said he heard voices in his head and believed his children were plotting against him. He also thought his children would be happier if they went to heaven. So he decided to kill all of them. After killing his children, Timothy traveled throughout the Southeast with the bodies of his 5 children covered in blankets in his car. He eventually dumped them in a remote wooded area in Alabama. In a second statement, Timothy said Nathan's punishment had gotten out of hand. When he went to Nathan's room, he found him dead. Not knowing what to do, Timothy decided to end the lives of all his children. After an autopsy, pathologists were unable to determine a definitive cause of death. However, they theorized that Nathan may have been too weak from the excessive punishment Timothy had imposed on him, making it easier to kill Nathan. Investigators questioned Timothy's actions, particularly why he did not call 911 immediately after the incident. Instead, he attempted to conceal and dispose of his children. Timothy later led investigators to where he had dumped the children's bodies that same day. The remains of the 5 children were found on September 10th. On September 11th, evidence from Timothy's car was collected and turned over to South Carolina authorities. Some of the evidence included family photos, children's clothing, children's drawings, letters from his mother to the children, Timothy's college diploma, and his passport. Notably, Timothy Jones Jr.'s handwritten notes included a list of actions related to the disposal of the bodies, such as moving the bodies, grinding the bones into powder or small pieces, burning the bodies, and preparing necessary items such as camping equipment, gas, and muriatic acid. On September 13, 2014, Jones was admitted to a correctional institution and placed in a special cell separate from the general population. Since then, he has been evaluated by mental health experts, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic specialists. Opinions among these professionals varied. Some diagnosed him with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or a personality disorder. They suggested his mental state during the crime might have been worsened by drug use and a traumatic brain injury he sustained at age 15, which could have contributed to underlying psychosis. These theories were presented to the jury during his trial. Conversely, other specialists argued that Timothy was mentally competent and that his attempts to hide evidence, including his children, showed he knew his actions were morally and legally wrong. His internet search history indicated he understood what he was doing and how to do it. The prosecution argued that Timothy succumbed to the pressures of a failing marriage and the challenges of raising 5 young children. According to his statements, the catalyst for his actions was his wife's alleged infidelity with their neighbor, who is now her husband. She testified that she did not commit adultery and that her relationship with the neighbor began only after her divorce. The trial occurred in late May 2019, featuring weeks of intense testimonies and evidence against Timothy. The crime is considered one of the most horrific murders in South Carolina's history. Mara's last words to her father were, "Daddy, I love you." When police searched the house, they found Naten's favorite Toy Story toy broken into pieces. Naten appeared to have been the most severely punished. Nevertheless, all testimonies agreed on one thing: the children loved their father. On June 13, 2019, after 2 hours of deliberation, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to death. He is currently in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, wearing a green jumpsuit that identifies him as a death row inmate. This tragic case ended the lives of innocent children because of marital issues, with both the father and mother making irreversible mistakes. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Graciela Garcia. Graciela Garcia was born on October 6, 1971, in Mexico. Her family was working class and they hoped to provide a better future for their children. As a result, her parents decided to move to the United States and eventually settled in Hermiston, Oregon. Graciela was too young to remember the hardships of the move. She attended Umatilla High School, a low-cost school where 66% of the student body was Hispanic. Graciela made friends easily and stood out with her outgoing. She later studied business at Blue Mountain College. However, since she was young, she has had a passion for hairdressing and has had the goal of owning her own hair salon. With passion and hard work, Graciela believed that her plans could come true with the right approach. By February 2006, she had become the owner of Carr's Beauty Salon. Thanks to her talent and charisma, she quickly became famous in society. Moreover, her professional image also contributed to the prestige of the salon. She is passionate about her work and has a deep understanding of new beauty trends. Thanks to that, she always has a loyal customer base. Some of her customers have become close friends and are often invited to her home. She is respected and loved by everyone in town. Her private life is also filled with joy and happiness. She was pursued by many men when she was young, but she only loved one. That man became her first love. They have 2 beautiful daughters, Annabelle and Gabriella, often called Gabby. However, that love did not last long. The man left the family. It seems that his feelings for her faded over time. Despite becoming a single mother, she did not feel hopeless. Instead, she focused on self-improvement and pursued a degree in cosmetology. After her divorce, Graciela met Romero Sanchez, a regular customer at the beauty salon where she worked. At first, their relationship was just a friendship. However, Romero later asked Graciela out, and she accepted. Gradually, their relationship became closer and deeper. However, when Graciela introduced Romero to her family, they felt uncomfortable because of his cold and distant attitude. Annabelle and Gabby, Graciela's 2 daughters, tried many times to connect with Romero, but he did not respond. Graciela's children were confused by such behavior, but they attributed it to personality differences. Graciela's partner seemed to be a strange and unapproachable person, which puzzled the people around her. They could not believe that a woman as full of life and fun as her could be so passionately in love with such a dry person. However, they still respected her decision. When Graciela announced her upcoming marriage, everyone showed their support and shared her joy. Especially Annabelle and Gabby, They wanted to see her happy and loved. On the wedding day, guests also noticed Romero's arrogance and conceit. Some thought he seemed too jealous when trying to steal all the bride's attention. When Graciella's young grandchildren came to congratulate the newlyweds, Romero treated them with contempt, making them feel uncomfortable. Afterwards, Graciella's relatives could not hide their true feelings about this man. Annabelle even openly stated that she did not consider him a stepfather and just wanted to maintain a normal relationship like other families. After the wedding, the Graciella family had 2 more sons, Arthur and Jacob. They moved in together at Graciella's house. Graciella's youngest son, Jacob, noticed that Romero began to act as if he were the sole owner of the house. Initially, Graciella tried to set personal boundaries, but because she did not like confrontation, she quickly gave in to Romero. He was hot-tempered and never gave in or apologized first. To avoid creating tension in the family, Graciella continued to give in to Romero. However, over time, Graciella began to realize that she had rushed into this marriage. In conversations with her relatives, Graciella confessed that she felt constrained and oppressed. Her husband controlled her and did not let her go anywhere alone. Despite this, Graciella never said she wanted to leave this abusive relationship. It seems she still loves him. Graciella's family gradually realized that she had become attached to the wrong man. Romero not only controlled Graciella but also lived off of his wife, much to her family's dismay. Romero was a skilled manipulator, constantly stalking Graciella, controlling her correspondence, and even threatening to break up the friendship between Graciella and her friends. He did not want to let her go anywhere, or sometimes he would show up unexpectedly, as if testing her loyalty. His jealousy became excessive and uncontrollable. She felt ashamed and self-conscious because of his behavior, and as a result, she limited her social life. She only communicated with her family and no longer connected with friends or colleagues as before. This seriously affected her work, as her profession required her to communicate regularly with clients and attend various events. Her friends and colleagues noticed a change in Graciella. She was no longer the cheerful and bright woman she used to be. She looked sad and tired, and she was clearly unhappy. Her children also noticed that she had changed in both her mood and appearance. They saw that she had lost her independence and confidence. After discussing it with each other, Graciella's family agreed that they did not like Romero. However, since he was Graciella's choice, there was not much they could do to change the situation. They could only respect her decision. Other relatives also expressed doubts about Romero, but no one knew how to help her in this situation. Graciella and Romero needed help with their relationship, and Gabby had mentioned this to her mother. However, Graciella believed that she would manage her personal life on her own. In 2018, Graciella decided to move her salon to her home for convenience. However, her family was skeptical as they had not heard about the plan for 12 years. Some customers commented that Romero's constant presence at the salon made them feel uncomfortable. Some people thought that Graciella moved the salon home to solve the problem, but others doubted that the idea came from Romero. However, Graciella was happy about the change and believed that working from home would bring her closer to Jacob and Romero. At the end of the year, she and her husband renovated a room into a beauty salon, completing it in May 2019. The salon closed shortly after, but Graciella's reputation remained intact, and rumors of her reopening attracted many customers, including new ones. Graciella was delighted with her career success, but became increasingly secretive about her personal life. However, after 17 years of marriage, Graciella and Romero decided to separate. Romero always kept in touch with their children and saw them regularly. Graciella and her ex-husband shared custody of their youngest son, while the other children were grown and living on their own, but they still kept in regular contact with their family and participated in family activities. Graciela went through the divorce with a calm and optimistic attitude. After the divorce, Graciela focused on developing her beauty salon and spent her free time taking care of her family and close friends. On the morning of November 9, 2019, Romero visited Graciela's eldest daughter, Annabelle, and reported Graciela missing. According to Romero, Graciela and he had been together the night before. However, when he woke up the next morning, he was surprised to find that she was no longer there. Romero tried to contact Graciela but received no response. Annabelle was shocked by the news and Romero's reaction. He cried and appeared distressed. This made Annabelle feel strange because Romero usually did not show emotions in front of them. Romero also said that Graciela had been acting strangely recently, even hinting that she might have found another man in her life. Annabelle felt that Romero's words were insincere and his tears seemed fake, which made her start to doubt his behavior and worry about her mother. Romero usually avoided communicating with his wife's children. But after a while, he changed and decided to connect with them. After Romero left, Annabelle decided to inform the rest of the family about what had happened. Graciela's family gathers to find out what's happening to her. Graciela's car was parked in the driveway. If she decided to leave Romero, she would definitely use her own car. Another thing that surprised them was the neatness of Graciela's house. Everything was perfectly arranged and in order, far beyond normal. However, this was completely contrary to Graciela's personality and lifestyle, because if she went somewhere, her belongings and accessories would be scattered all over the room. Normally, Graciela would spend a lot of time in front of the mirror choosing her outfit for the day. However, the fact that she went out without any jewelry worried the whole family and they wondered why. As she walked around the house, Gabby noticed something strange. The large blanket had been put in the washing machine, something her mother never did. The blanket was too heavy and someone else had washed it, apparently Romero, which made Gabby suspicious. Romero did not explain this, saying that he did not pay attention to such details. But then people realized that several important items were missing from the house, including Graciela's passport, driver's license, and cell phone. This raised further suspicions about Romero's actions. On November 11th, Annabelle contacted law enforcement at the police station and discovered something surprising. Although Romero had known about his wife's disappearance since the 9th or possibly earlier, he had not notified the police. Therefore, Annabelle was the first to file a missing persons report to her mother. Another incident raised concerns about Graciela's safety. She asked Gabby to pick her up, but even though Gabby said it would take some time because of the distance, Graciela continued to ask. Gabby was surprised by this unexpected request for help. Graciela explained that everything was fine and that her request was just a result of an argument with Romero. When they met, Graciela appeared relaxed, smiling and asking her daughter not to worry. She believed that arguments between lovers were just a form of renewal in their relationship. However, after they broke up, Gabby remained uneasy and became increasingly worried about her mother. The investigation began after Annabelle contacted the police. This caused the relationship between Graciela's family and Romero to deteriorate. Romero seemed angry that Graciela's family had notified law enforcement about her disappearance. Romero gave an official statement about his wife's disappearance. He said that Graciela had either wanted to be alone or that she had moved in with another man and would be back soon. That was his answer every time someone asked. However, the police did not ignore this report. Officers launched an investigation into the missing Graciela's disappearance, considering the possibility that she may have been a victim of a crime. They started by searching her house, where her relatives reported that only a few personal items were missing, without finding any other suspicious signs. The investigation expanded to include interviews with her children, Romero, and other close family members, including her ex-husband. However, no useful information was gathered from these interviews. While everyone expressed doubts about Romero's behavior, he cooperated fully with the detectives, allowing them to search his home, answering questions, providing his DNA, and taking a polygraph test. Despite this cooperation, there was insufficient evidence to prove his involvement in the case. Further investigation revealed that Graciella's phone last sent a signal near a bridge in Washington on November 9 at 12:30 p.m. After that, her phone was turned off. Her bank accounts and social media accounts showed no activity, suggesting that she had not accessed since her disappearance. Hundreds of witnesses were questioned, and all the places she regularly visited were checked, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. The investigators found her disappearance to be highly suspicious, as it seemed she had vanished without leaving any clues. For months into the investigation, the Hermiston Police Department announced that they had found no reliable information about Graciella's last whereabouts. Although Romero had not reported her missing, he was not accused of any wrongdoing. Graciella's family became increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress despite their constant contact with authorities throughout the incident. However, as time passed, these updates became less frequent and eventually stopped, forcing Graciella's children to take initiative and contact the police station themselves to inquire about the status of the case. In an effort to reinvigorate the search, Graciella's family turned to the media in March 2020, seeking public assistance and attention. They hoped that by sharing their story, they might gather new information. Graciella's daughter Gabby was mainly in charge of communicating with the press. She expressed her family's increasing frustration with the lack of progress in the case and criticized the police for not keeping them informed for such a long time. She urged investigators to focus more on finding her mother, Graciella, and to take a closer look at the suspicious circumstances surrounding disappearance. Graciella's family suspected something was wrong, as the condition of her belongings was strange and unusual in her home. However, it was unclear who would want to harm her, as Graciella did not appear to have any enemies. The family also believed that Graciella would not have left on her own, as she would have contacted them to reassure. Posters and flyers describing Graciella were scattered throughout the city in search of clues to the case. Graciella, who is 49 years old, Latina, 1.6 meters tall, 62 kilograms, and with dyed blonde hair. Local residents were also asked to be vigilant and report any information that might help the investigation. Her children were so concerned that they asked for a new detective team to take over the case, as they suspected bias in collaboration with a suspect, Romero, who was acquainted with the original investigators. The Graciella family expressed concerns about several inconsistencies in the investigation, including the fact that Romero's phone was turned off on the day of Graciella's disappearance. Additionally, Romero's calm behavior raised suspicions, as it didn't with the typical reaction expected from someone whose loved one has suddenly gone missing. As a result, the Graciella family demanded that the suspect be arrested immediately. Police Chief Jason Edmiston responded to allegations surrounding Graciella's disappearance, confirming that her case is being treated as suspicious and possibly involving foul play. However, he emphasized that this is just one theory and that the investigation remains impartial, driven by evidence. Edmiston also dismissed claims of social connections between Romero and law enforcement as baseless. Edmiston noted that the spread of misinformation has hindered the investigation. Certain information must be kept confidential, and authorities have sought assistance from the FBI. The police chief expressed frustration over public criticism of the police's actions. Separately, Gabby organized a fundraiser to hire a private detective, a move seen as a critique of the police's handling of the investigation. This perceived criticism suggested that the police were not doing enough to find Graciella. 1 year after Graciella disappeared, her family organized a memorial gathering. Here, friends and people who knew her shared stories about her lively and cheerful personality. They prayed for her safe return, lit candles, and later placed signs outside the police station, urging authorities to continue the search for Graciela Garcia. In September 2023, a major development in the case occurred when Romero Sanchez was severely injured in an attack and that required surgery. There was speculation that the shooter was Mason Garcia, Graciela's brother. The attack suggests that Graciela's family had become frustrated with the lack of progress in the investigation and took matters into their own hands, potentially leading to further tragedy. The disappearance of Graciela Garcia remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in a state of agonizing. This has significantly affected the health and mental well-being of her family. Living without knowing what happened to a loved one can be more challenging than coping with a confirmed loss. It remains unknown whether Graciela is alive or not. Her children continue to hope that the truth will soon be revealed and justice will be served to the criminals. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Callie Ann Poulton. Callie Ann Poulton was born on September 20, 1989, in Rochester, New York. As an only child, she received all the love and attention from her parents. However, when Callie turned 3, her parents decided to divorce, and she stayed with her mother, Judy. Despite the divorce, Callie's father maintained a good relationship with Judy and regularly visited his daughter. After the divorce, Judy moved to a quiet suburban apartment complex in Rochester. Although Callie's father helped with childcare, Judy faced financial difficulties. To make ends meet, she took on a part-time job delivering magazines to her neighbors. Her goal was to save enough money to take Callie on a trip to Disney World the following summer. On the evening of May 23, 1994, Judy was preparing for her delivery shift. She was at home, inserting leaflets into the magazines, when Callie asked to go for a walk. It was an evening, and Callie wanted to ride her tricycle. Judy checked outside and saw other children playing in the yard, so she allowed Callie to go out for a short time, instructing her to stay within the yard. Callie ran outside with her tricycle, and Judy planned to finish preparing the magazines and then take Callie to McDonald's after completing her delivery route. Judy stepped outside with the magazines, intending to call out to her daughter Callie, but Callie was nowhere to be seen. Judy looked around the yard, called out her daughter's name, but there was no response. She searched the yard and then the surrounding complex grounds, but Callie was gone. Usually, when Callie rode her tricycle, the creaking of its wheels was noticeable, but now there was silence. As Judy's panic grew, she began to cry out for her daughter, drawing the attention of the neighbors. They joined her in searching for Callie, but no one had seen Callie. The complex was heavily wooded, and a fence separated the houses from the nearby highway, making it unlikely that Callie could have wandered off on her own. Judy knew that Callie was only allowed to ride her tricycle in their yard, and Callie had always obeyed her mother before. It was also unlikely that Callie could have gone far on her small bike without being seen. With each passing minute, Judy's fears grew, and she decided to call the police. The officers arrived quickly and began a thorough search of the complex. As the search continued, officers went door to door, asking if anyone had seen Callie. Police suspected that Callie was still in the complex and they believed the suspect was likely a resident of the complex. It would have been difficult for an outsider to get inside, kidnap Callie, and drive away without being noticed. To assist in the search, residents of the 300-apartment complex voluntarily allowed police to enter their homes. In case there was no one in the house, the complex manager used the spare key to search. Unfortunately, searching each apartment yielded no results. Callie and her bike were not found. After an all-night search, the case was reclassified as a kidnapping at around 4 a.m. A specialist unit took over the case and detectives questioned Judy about possible enemies. They asked Judy if Callie's father was involved, but Judy ruled this out and said he had no motive. Detectives also asked if Judy had noticed anyone suspicious among the residents. She mentioned Mark, a 22-year-old man who had just moved in with his wife and young son. Judy noticed Mark's behavior was unusual. Judy and Mark spoke briefly a few times, and during one conversation, Mark commented that Callie was beautiful. Although Judy had heard similar comments from others, Mark's tone made her uncomfortable. What really caught her attention, however, was when Mark added that he had spied on all the little girls in the complex and that Callie was the most beautiful. Judy became increasingly wary of Mark after their conversations, and she made an effort to limit her interactions with him, even though they still occasionally crossed paths in the yard. One conversation in particular raised her suspicions. Mark asked Judy if Callie would tell Judy if someone tried to touch her. Judy found this question alarming and quickly ended the conversation. As a result, she no longer allowed Callie to play with Mark's son, even when she was present. During her conversation with detectives, Judy recalled a detail that had previously seemed insignificant. When she was searching for Callie, she had asked Mark if he had seen Callie, and he claimed he did. Judy also noticed that Mark's sneakers were missing their laces, but at the time, she was too worried about Callie to think much of it. The detectives brought Mark in for questioning, and he denied any involvement in Callie's disappearance. He even agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed. However, Judy's own account provided Mark with an alibi, as she had seen him on the playground with his son at the time she was searching for Callie. The police also searched Mark's apartment but found no sign of Callie or her bicycle. As a result, Mark was no longer considered a suspect, and the investigation continued without any leads. The police investigation into Callie's disappearance began by questioning her mother, Judy, as a standard procedure. Judy cooperated fully, answering all their questions, but she found it distressing that the police were focusing so much on her when they had no other leads. As the search for Callie continued, the case received widespread attention, with news reports, billboards, and flyers throughout the city. The police received over 1,000 of tips, but unfortunately, each one led to a dead end, and the case remained unsolved for months. Despite the lack of progress, Judy remained hopeful that her daughter would be found alive. She quit her job to devote all her time to the search, printing and posting flyers, contacting media outlets, and working tirelessly to keep the case in the public eye. With the help of some compassionate supporters, she was able to raise $100,000 as a reward for any useful information. Judy's efforts led to national television coverage, including appearances on The Oprah Winfrey Show and a popular TV show about unsolved crimes. Judy also partnered with local businesses to distribute flyers in their offices, establishments, and on commercial vehicles. She even convinced 2 airlines to include the flyers in ticket envelopes. Although these efforts generated new leads, the police were unable to make any significant progress in solving the case. The turning point in the case occurred when a woman called the police on August 9, 1996 to report a serious argument with her husband. She was tired of his strange behavior and wanted a divorce. In an attempt to persuade her to stay, the husband confessed to a shocking crime: he had killed Callie. The woman was stunned and immediately called 911 and revealed her husband's identity to the police. The husband's name is none other than Mark Christie, Judy's neighbor. However, the detectives faced a significant obstacle. Under state law, any information shared between spouses was protected and inadmissible in court. This meant that even if Mark's confession was true, the police couldn't use it as evidence to arrest or question him. Furthermore, Mark had been in his yard with his child shortly after Callie's disappearance, and his apartment had been searched early in the investigation, making it unlikely that he had the opportunity to kidnap and kill her. The detective in charge of the case, Detective Crow, decided to talk to Mark after hearing his wife's story. Mark and his family had moved out of the complex just weeks after Callie went missing due to serious allegations. Mark had been accused by the two girls' parents of standing naked in front of his house, which made the detective suspicious. Although no investigation had been launched, the incident appeared to be suspicious. Crow traveled to Mark's new home, 50 miles from Rochester, but encountered resistance. Mark's mother opened the door and said her son would not talk to the police without an attorney present. Mark learned about his wife calling the police and contacted a lawyer. This meant that the police could not use Mark's confession to his wife as evidence, and his lawyer could prevent any questioning. Despite this, Crow persisted. While talking to Mark's mother, Mark appeared and Crow persuaded him to answer some questions about Callie's case. Crow suggested they discuss the matter over coffee at a nearby restaurant. Mark agreed to Crow's surprise, but only on the condition that Crow would then take him to see his lawyer. Crow and Mark stopped at a nearby Italian restaurant. Crow tried to engage in the conversation normally, avoiding any pressure or tense questions. This approach seemed to work as Mark began to open up more while they waited for their food. Mark expressed deep remorse for his actions towards Callie and explained that her image had haunted him for the past 2 years, constantly appearing on news reports and flyers. Crow tried not to scare Mark. Crow had spoken to Mark before in the early stages of the investigation. But this new conversation felt different. Crow believed that Mark was feeling proud of having avoided capture, so Crow decided to appeal to Mark's ego. Crow told Mark that Mark was actually smarter than the entire investigation team, and Mark responded by saying that he didn't want to sound boastful, but his method of handling the bike was actually very smart. Mark offered to share details about how he got rid of the bike, but only on the condition that Mark wouldn't discuss anything else. Crow maintained a friendly and non-threatening tone, reassuring Mark that he was in control of the conversation and could share as much or as little as he wanted. Mark said that Callie's tricycle had been in his apartment 3 days after she went missing. Mark knew that the police would probably search every apartment without a warrant when a child was in danger, but Mark found a loophole in the law. Although police could search for a missing child, they were not allowed to search for physical evidence. This meant they could only test spaces that were large enough for a child to fit. To hide the bike, Mark decided to disassemble it and hide the bike's parts in small and hard-to-reach areas of his apartment. He wrapped some parts in clothes and put them in the closet, and put other parts in small bags and took them out to the car. He then dumped the pieces in various locations far from home. Meanwhile, the police were stationed at the exit of the complex, checking each car, but since they were only looking for Callie, the small bags containing the bike parts did not arouse any suspicions. Detective Crow saw an opportunity to get a full confession from Mark. Crow took a sympathetic approach, suggesting that Callie's death may have been an accident and not Mark's fault. Mark asked about the sentence he could face, and Crow estimated it could be about 25 years. Mark felt this was unfair, as it meant he had to spend half his life in prison and away from his family. He also mentioned that he had lived with guilt for 2 years, implying that this should be taken into account when sentencing. Despite Mark's questionable logic, Crow continued to encourage Mark to confess, suggesting it would bring him relief. Mark agreed to tell the truth, but only after consulting with a lawyer. Crow knew that Mark's lawyer would advise Mark against confessing to a crime without solid evidence. So, Crow decided to be straightforward with Mark, explaining that if he didn't tell the truth, Callie's parents would never know what happened to their daughter. Mark responded by saying that Callie hadn't suffered. Crow senses that Mark was confessing and encourages him to do the right thing. Mark looked at Crow and finally admitted to his actions. He repeated that Callie hadn't suffered and Mark confessed to strangling her with his bare hands. He then added that he hadn't done anything else to her. Mark recounted the events of that evening, explaining that Callie had come to his apartment and asked to play with his 1.5-year-old son. Mark let her in and took her bike to the kitchen. Aware that Callie's mother wouldn't approve of her visiting, Mark let Callie go upstairs to play with the child without drawing Judy's attention to the situation. However, when Mark heard Judy calling out for her daughter in the yard about 10 minutes later, he panicked. He knew that Judy would be furious if she discovered that he had let Callie into his house without permission. In a moment of desperation, Mark went upstairs to the children's room and strangled Callie with his bare hands. Detective Crow was skeptical about certain aspects of Mark's story from the start. It seemed more plausible that Mark had lured Callie into his apartment under false pretenses, taking advantage of his wife's absence at work. Once inside, Mark might have attempted to molest Callie, but when he heard Judy calling out for her daughter, he may have panicked and killed Callie to avoid being exposed. Crow recalled that Judy had seen Mark wearing sneakers without laces, which suggested that he had used them to strangle Callie. This detail implied premeditation, contradicting Mark's claim that the crime was spontaneous. To avoid raising Mark's suspicions, Crow decided to continue listening to his story. Mark claimed that after the murder, he left Callie's body in the kitchen and took his son outside to establish an alibi. He deliberately allowed Judy to see him in the playground, hoping to deflect any suspicion. Once Judy began searching the complex, Mark returned home and hid Callie's body in a laundry basket, covering it with clothes. A short time later, he placed the basket in the trunk of his car. Mark confessed that the chaos of the search, with many people looking for Judy's daughter, allowed him to carry out these actions unnoticed. Mark took his son and drove to the building where he worked as a security guard. He parked near the back, left the basket with Callie's body by the door, and then entered the building through the main entrance, telling his co-workers he had forgotten something at work. His toll didn't raise any suspicions. So he made his way to the back door, which he opened from the inside, and retrieved the basket. Mark then climbed onto a large tank containing liquid coolant, opened the top, and dropped Callie's body into it after tying a heavy metal object to her. He got rid of Callie's clothes but left her earrings on. After disposing of the body, Mark returned home and joined the neighbors in searching for Callie. By doing so, he had already removed the body from the complex before the police became involved, and no one suspected anything. At the end of his confession, Mark expressed regret for killing Callie, stating it was a mistake. Crow paid for their food, and Mark left a $2 tip before willingly going with Crow to the police station, where he was arrested for murder. When Mark's lawyer found out about the confession, he attempted to retract it, but the attempt was unsuccessful. This was because Mark had provided the information willingly, and Detective Crow had followed proper procedures. As a result, the police went to Mark's workplace, opened the tank, and made a gruesome discovery. Even after 2 years, the victim's body was still inside. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, experts were unable to determine the cause of death or gather any further information. They confirmed the identity of the remains, which was none other than Callie. Mark admitted his guilt to the judge and received a minimum 25-year prison sentence, just as Detective Crow had predicted. Although Mark's lawyer managed to have the kidnapping charges dropped, he was still convicted of murder. However, Mark's case took a surprising turn in 2010. The police reopened a 1988 case involving the brutal murder of 74-year-old Viola Manville, who was killed while walking in a Rochester suburb. At the time, Mark was just 16 years old and was considered a suspect, but he passed a polygraph test, showing no signs of deception. As a result, another man, Frank Sterling, was arrested and eventually confessed to the crime after a lengthy overnight interrogation. Years later, Frank tried to appeal his sentence, claiming that the police had coerced his confession and that he was disoriented by the end of the interrogation. However, his appeals were unsuccessful until 2010, when the case was reopened and new evidence was sent to the lab. DNA analysis revealed the suspect's DNA matched not Frank's, but Mark Christie's. Mark, 39 at the time, admitted to murdering Viola in 2011 and received an additional 28 years in prison. Despite his confession, he showed no remorse and never revealed his motives for the crime. Meanwhile, Frank was finally released from prison after 19 years of wrongful imprisonment. He went on to sue the authorities and was awarded nearly $10 million in 2014. However, his life was cut short when he died of a heart attack in 2017 at the age of 54. Mark is currently serving his sentence in prison, but he may be eligible for parole in the near future. It's unclear whether he will be released, and his case serves as a reminder of the importance of thorough investigations. If the investigators had not mistakenly focused on Frank and coerced a false confession, Mark might have been caught earlier and possibly prevented from committing another crime, the murder of Callie. Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tanya McKinley. Tanya McKinley was born on January 25, 1961, in the small town of Milton, Florida. She grew up in a loving family and was very close to her older sister. After graduating from high school, Tanya decided to move to Pensacola, a town about 25 miles away from her hometown. She pursued a career in the medical field. Tanya moved to a new city with her cousin Vanita, and they shared an apartment. After moving in, Tanya met a man named James, and they began dating. They eventually moved in together and had a son, Timothy, in 1983. Although Tanya was happy to be a mother, her relationship with James was troubled. They argued frequently, and about a year after their son was born, they decided to go their separate ways. By the end of 1984, Tanya was temporarily living with Vanita, who was now married with 2 children. Tanya planned to find her own place as soon as possible. On New Year's Eve, Tanya, Vanita, and her husband decided to celebrate at a local bar. They left their children at a late-night daycare. Around midnight, Vanita and her husband were getting ready to leave, but Tanya wanted to stay a little longer. Since the daycare closed at 1 a.m., Vanita agreed to pick up Tanya's son, allowing Tanya to stay at the bar. Before leaving, Vanita asked Tanya how she planned to get home, since they had driven there together. Tanya replied that she would get a ride from their acquaintance at the bar. However, when Vanita woke up on January 1st, she found that Tanya had not yet returned home. At first, Vanita thought Tanya might have slept over with a friend, so she was not too worried. Then, Vanita's mother-in-law arrived with heartbreaking news. Tanya had been found dead around 3 a.m. A Pensacola resident was on her way to the vet with her daughter. While driving, her daughter pointed out a person on the side of the road. Pensacola thought it might be a mannequin, but when she got out to check, she discovered it was a human body. Pensacola immediately returned home and called the police. Upon arriving at the scene, officers found the body of a woman lying in an empty lot beside the road. She had no shoes, her tights were down, and her dress was pulled up. Near the body, a blue towel with what appeared to be bloodstains was found. The police identified the victim as 23-year-old Tanya McKinley. Further investigation led them to discover her shoes and purse nearby, containing identification with her name on it. The body was turned over to medical experts for further examination. Meanwhile, police continued to process the crime scene. They soon discovered that Tanya likely did not die where she was found. There was no significant blood near the body, except for a stain on a towel, and signs on the ground suggested that the body had been dragged to the side of the road. On the towel and Tanya's body, investigators found several clues, including dog hair and a human hair. They suspected that the hair belonged to the killer, and that the killer may have owned a dog. Medical experts determined that Tanya had suffered a head injury from a heavy object, but her cause of death was actually strangulation. They also confirmed that the Tanya had been sexually assaulted. A semen sample was collected from her body, but at the time, DNA analysis was not yet widely used in forensic science. However, the experts were able to establish that the suspect had type B blood. Police began to develop a list of potential suspects. Police turned their attention to Tanya's ex-husband, James. After talking to Tanya's family and friends, police discovered that James and Tanya had argued frequently before and after the birth of their son. When Tanya decided to end the relationship, James was unhappy and tried to convince her to stay. Police believe that James followed Tanya to the bar on New Year's Eve, leading to a confrontation that ended in murder. They brought James in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in the crime. He also agreed to provide hair samples for comparison. Although experts were unable to extract DNA from the samples, they were able to compare the hairs under a microscope. The results showed that James' hair was significantly different from the hair found on Tanya's body and the towel. As a result, the police temporarily ruled him out as a suspect. Police focused on everyone who was at the bar on New Year's Eve. They asked Vanita if she had noticed anyone acting strangely or aggressively toward Tanya, but she said the evening had gone off without incident. Police also discovered that after Tanya split from her ex-husband, she had started dating a man named Kurt, who was a bartender at the bar where she spent New Year's Eve. Kurt was working the night of the murder. When questioned, Kurt denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he had gone to a New Year's party with friends after his shift. The police reviewed all the testimony and concluded that Kurt had enough time to commit the crime. Based on numerous interviews with people at the bar, the police determined that Tanya was last seen alive at 1:15 a.m., but no one saw her leave. The police also spoke with local residents where the body was discovered. A family reported driving past the scene at around 2 a.m. and were certain that there was no body at that time. This meant that Tanya was killed about 1.5 hours after she was last seen alive. During this time, Kurt was unable to provide an alibi. He volunteered to take a lie detector test, but the results were inconclusive, and further investigation revealed that Kurt's blood type did not match the killer's blood type, as determined by a semen sample. As a result, Kurt was cleared of the crime. Unable to analyze DNA from the killer's semen, and with no witnesses or concrete evidence, police could only assume that the perpetrator likely lived in the area where the body was discovered. The case had been closed for years due to lack of concrete evidence. Timothy, who was only 18 months old when his mother died, was raised by his father and Tanya's family. Together, they kept the truth about his mother's death a secret. When Timothy was 14 years old, he was informed that his mother had died in a car accident. As Christmas approached that year, out of curiosity, he searched his father's closet for his present, and Timothy stumbled upon a shocking letter addressed to television host Montel Williams, written by his father himself. In a letter, Timothy's father wrote asking for help in solving the murder of Timothy's mother, Tanya. The letter included a detailed account of the crime, which was the first time Timothy learned of his mother's tragic fate. Years later, in the early 2000s, police reopened Tanya's case, hoping that advances in DNA technology might help identify the killer. Police sent all available evidence to a lab for analysis. Experts discovered that the blood on a blue towel near Tanya's body came from a man, not Tanya. They created a DNA profile of the unidentified man and uploaded it to the FBI database. But there were no matches. The case was put on hold until 2015, when it was reopened, 30 years after the murder. Through investigation, the police discovered from the FBI's archive database that a person had some similarities with the DNA found at Tanya's crime scene. However, the match was not strong. To investigate further, the police learned about the person's family background and even contacted his relatives for assistance. These relatives cooperated and provided DNA samples for comparison. Unfortunately, the DNA analysis showed that his family was not involved in Tanya's death, leaving the police with no new leads. In 2018, a journalist named Tony Adam became interested in Tanya's case. Tony contacted the police offering help, and the police became suspicious of his involvement. Tony joined the investigation despite having no background in criminal investigations. The police, who had made little progress in the case, hoped that Tony's involvement wouldn't hinder the investigation. In 2019, a year after Tony got involved, police decided to identify the killer's relatives. This time, they enlisted the help of Parabon, a genetic genealogy company, and expanded the search to include primarily the DNA of known criminals. Parabon expanded its search to public genetic databases, which were much larger in scope. Unlike DNA evidence collected from a crime scene, these databases contain DNA samples that people have voluntarily uploaded to find relatives. To find the killer, experts used a process of elimination, carefully analyzing the family trees of potential relatives to identify someone who matched their suspect's criteria. They were looking for a man who was at least old enough to have committed the crime in 1985 and had a connection to the area where the crime was committed. In 2020, police identified a suspect in Tanya's murder. Daniel Wells, 57, had been arrested in the late 1980s for assault and indecent exposure. At the time, he was living in Pensacola, working as a carpenter and living with his wife and children. But to confirm whether Daniel was actually the killer, detectives needed to compare his DNA to the profile they collected from the crime scene. To prevent Daniel from fleeing, the police approached cautiously. They kept watch, waiting for an opportunity to collect a DNA sample from him without arousing Daniel's suspicion. Daniel threw a cigarette butt out of the car window near his workplace. The police collected the cigarette butt and immediately sent it to the lab for analysis. Experts extracted DNA from the saliva on the filter and compared it to the DNA of the killer in the Tanya case. The results were a match. The police eventually identified Daniel as the culprit and arrested him the same day. Despite the DNA test results, the police still tried to get Daniel to confess. They arranged for a patrol officer to stop Daniel's car under the pretext of doing a routine ID check. Detectives then approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to accompany them to the station without providing any further explanation. By withholding information, they intentionally kept Daniel in suspense, allowing them to proceed with the investigation cautiously. The police approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to come with them to the police station without further explanation. During the investigation, the detectives slowly steered the conversation toward Tanya's murder, asking Daniel about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. At first, he claimed to have never seen Tanya. However, when the detectives revealed that his DNA was found at the crime scene, his story began to unfold. As the questioning continued, Daniel's denials became increasingly unconvincing, and he grew more and more agitated. Detectives made it clear that the DNA evidence was irrefutable and that he would face consequences for his actions. As the interrogation continued, Daniel denied his guilt and became increasingly agitated. The police said the DNA evidence was incontrovertible and he would face the consequences for his actions. Faced with the evidence, Daniel finally broke down and began to speak. He and Tanya went to his house, where they had sex after drinking. However, an argument broke out, the argument escalated, and in a fit of rage, Daniel picked up a heavy wooden cutting board and hit Tanya over the head. When he realized she was dead, Daniel panicked and dumped her body in a location where it was later discovered. On his way back, Daniel discarded the Tanya's belongings and returned home. When questioned about the dog hairs found on the Tanya's clothes and towel, he attributed them to his roommate's black Labrador. Contrary to Daniel's claim that Tanya died from a head injury, the medical evidence clearly showed that the cause of death was strangulation. In a possible chain of events, Daniel struck Tanya in the head, but when he realized she was still alive, he resorted to strangling her. The police gathered enough evidence to arrest him for murder. Police then contacted Tanya's family, including her son Timothy, to inform them of the developments in the case. Timothy was deeply moved, thanking the police for finally identifying his mother's killer. 2 weeks after his arrest, Daniel's body was found in his cell. An investigation confirmed that he had committed suicide. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in Allamont Springs, Florida. She grew up in a loving family with her parents, an older brother, and a younger sister. Her father worked in construction and often traveled to other states for work, so her mother mainly took care of her and her siblings. Throughout her childhood, Jessica was a cheerful and active girl who loved playing outdoors with her friends and siblings and had a special love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when Jessica was 9 years old, her family planned to visit her grandparents for Easter. While her mother packed for the trip, her father went to the store to buy some vacation items. Jessica asked her mother if she could go to the yard to wait for her father to return. Her mother agreed but told her to stay in the yard and not wander off. The family's apartment complex was located in a quiet area, surrounded by many trees and away from the main road. The neighborhood was considered safe, and children often played outside without regular adult supervision. However, when Jessica's father returned home around 6 p.m., he asked his wife where Jessica was, and she was surprised to learn that Jessica was not in the yard as she had thought. The parents searched the yard but couldn't find their daughter Jessica. Growing increasingly worried, they started asking neighbors if they had seen Jessica. A neighbor reported seeing Jessica sitting on a bench, reading a book, but this information yielded no results. As night began to fall and Jessica was still missing, her parents contacted the police. The police quickly began search operations, questioning neighbors and canvassing the surrounding area. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to find Jessica, forcing the police to expand their search to nearby streets. A few hours later, the police received an unexpected call from an unknown number. The caller's voice was distorted by background noise. But the police determined that Jessica might have been near a water pumping station several miles from her home. When the police arrived at the water pumping station, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Jessica's body was discovered near the pumping station, hidden in a black trash bag. This location was only a few meters from the road, but the pumping station was located under a bridge, making it nearly impossible to detect. Next to the body were some magazines and a children's mirror. The police quickly identified the victim as Jessica Knott and handed her body over to the medical examiner for further investigation. Investigators turned their attention to tracing the 911 call, which they believed was made by the killer. Their goal was to use the call to identify the killer. However, the call was made from a public phone at a nearby gas station, and when the police arrived, the perpetrator had already fled. Detectives tried to take fingerprints, but it was a difficult task because this was a public phone booth, which likely had many fingerprints from different users. In addition, it was possible that the killer had wiped the phone clean after calling or had worn gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. Further investigation revealed that Jessica may have been killed elsewhere and her body moved to the water pumping station. Evidence on the ground showed that the killer pulled the body out of the car, then put it in a trash bag and dragged it to the water pumping station. Jessica's clothes were still intact, except for a missing shoe, which was not found at the scene. The only potential clue at the crime scene was tire tracks on the ground. There was a possibility that they belonged to the killer's car, so the police took photos and analyzed the prints. Meanwhile, a medical examination of the body showed that the victim died from strangulation, with marks on the face and neck indicating the killer used bare hands. An autopsy showed that Jessica had eaten a hamburger shortly before her death. Her mother said she did not give Jessica a hamburger that day, suggesting the killer may have provided her with food. Additionally, forensic experts found no evidence of sexual assault, leaving the killer's motive unknown. Initially, police had suspected Jessica's parents of being involved in her disappearance because they had not had a solid alibi. Jessica's mother had claimed that she had packed up the apartment, and her father had claimed that he had been out shopping, so they clearly had had the opportunity to commit the crime. The police had been confused as to how the killer had been able to get Jessica out of the yard without anyone noticing or her screaming, leading them to believe that the killer might have been someone Jessica knew and trusted, and she might have voluntarily left with them. The killer's voice on the 911 call had provided another clue. In the recording, experts had detected feelings of grief and remorse, suggesting that the killer had truly felt remorse for his actions. The fact that the killer had taken the risk of calling 911 suggested that they might have been trying to minimize guilt or manipulate the investigation. However, the obvious sadness in the killer's voice had led investigators to believe that the killer had likely been remorseful for his actions. The investigation had reached a turning point when police had found a roll of black garbage bags in the trunk of Jessica's father's car, similar to the bag used to dispose of the victim's body. However, expert examination had shown that the bags had come from another manufacturer, eliminating Jessica's father as a suspect. The focus of the investigation had then turned to other suspects. Forensic experts had conducted a thorough examination of the victim's clothes and body, thereby obtaining many clues. One notable discovery had been that there had been a significant amount of dog hair on Jessica's clothes, even though her family had not owned dogs. This suggested that the dog hair might have come from the perpetrator's dog. Additionally, human hair of an unidentified man had been found on Jessica's body, and experts had been working to extract the DNA profile from the sample. However, this process had taken several days. Further examination had revealed two strange fibers on Jessica's clothes that experts had analyzed and determined likely had originated from car seat covers and carpets. This finding had supported the theory that Jessica had been killed at a location other than the water pumping station and then transported there by car. To determine the breed of dog that had shed hair on Jessica's clothes, experts had used the FBI's specialized database, which contained microscopic photos of hair from many different dog breeds. By comparing fur samples with a database, experts had determined that the fur had belonged to a Shar-Pei. This discovery had suggested that the perpetrator might have owned a Shar-Pei and that the dog's fur had been transferred to Jessica's clothes at the perpetrator's home or in the car. According to investigators' initial theory, the killer might have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to buy hamburgers at McDonald's, and then taken her to his home, where she had been murdered. To aid the investigation, experts had tried to improve the quality of the phone call recordings, but this had proved difficult. They had decided to try a different approach and sought help from NASA, which had advanced audio enhancement tools originally designed for use in space recordings. NASA had agreed to assist and provide police with higher quality audio. However, experts still needed to sample the suspect's voice to compare with the call recording. Detectives had suspected that the killer might have known Jessica, so they had played the call recording for her mother, hoping she could recognize the voice. At first, she had said the voice was familiar but couldn't place it. When she had heard it a second time, she suddenly had realized that the voice belonged to a neighbor who had lived in their complex. Although she couldn't remember his name, she had told detectives that he often had taken his Shar-Pei for walks in the yard. Police had quickly identified this man as James Crow, 35 years old. Hours after Jessica had disappeared, investigators had questioned her neighbors, including James Crow. James had told them that he had seen Jessica in her yard while walking his dog, Pumpkin, a Shar-Pei. They had exchanged a few words and then he had left. Detectives had looked into his past and had found no history of criminal activity. He used to be a truck driver, but had been currently unemployed and had spent most of his time walking around the neighborhood with his dog. Detectives realized that the similarity in voice and breed of dog had not been enough to arrest James, so they obtained a search warrant for James' car. Inside, they found two disturbing clues. Under the front passenger seat, they discovered an empty Happy Meal bag, which was suspicious because James had no children and Jessica had had a McDonald's hamburger in her stomach. Additionally, the car had brand new tires that had barely been used, which James had claimed to have changed on the day Jessica was murdered. However, his previous tire had not been very old and could have lasted a few more years. Police investigated further and discovered that one of James' old tires had been left behind at an auto service. When they compared the tire tread pattern to prints found near Jessica's body, they did not match. However, it was possible that tire marks on the ground did not belong to the killer's car but to another vehicle. Police also searched James' apartment, where they found a box containing several rolls of trash bags similar in size and color to the one found on Jessica's body. To determine if there was any connection between the bags, detectives needed to find a way to prove that they had come from the same manufacturer. At first, this seemed impossible, as the bags had no distinctive markings or features and there were hundreds of manufacturers of similar products. The detectives had an idea to solve this problem. They contacted Roberts, a quality control specialist for the company that had manufactured the bags found in James' apartment. Roberts pinpointed the factory that had produced the bags based on a special code on the cardboard box containing the rolls. The code indicated that the product had come from a facility in Virginia. Roberts explained that a small amount of iron or titanium was added to the bag's composition, depending on its color. Because the factory produced bags in many different colors, the materials used in production changed constantly, causing the ratio of plastic and iron or titanium to change daily. To take advantage of this information, experts used high-intensity X-rays to measure the presence of iron and titanium in the plastic of handbags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene. This analysis provided exact ratios of elements, which were identical in both bags. This suggested the bags had been made on the same day and possibly from the same batch. However, there was more to the story than that. During the production of garbage bags, microscopic debris accumulated on the machine and imprinted on the plastic sheets as they were rolled out. This created a unique stripe pattern on each bag, visible to the naked eye. Even though the debris on the conveyor belt was constantly changing, creating a new pattern every few hundred feet of fabric, the results were consistent enough to provide another possible lead in the investigation. The similarity of the bags suggested that not only had they been produced in the same batch, but they had also been produced within a short time frame, perhaps just a few hours apart. Comparison of the bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene revealed a striking match in the lines and patterns on the bags. On further inspection, experts showed that the bags had been rolled into bundles by machine, which could have created irregularities during the rolling process. Although these irregularities were hardly noticeable, they could be detected by examining the edges of the bag, where the folds formed a unique pattern. Upon re-examining the bags, experts discovered that the pattern on the bags at the suspect's apartment matched the pattern at the crime scene. Further analysis also revealed that fibers found on Jessica's clothing had matched the carpet in James' apartment and the upholstery of his car seat. An audio expert had also analyzed the 911 call recording and compared it to James's voice sample, concluding that the voice in the recording belonged to James. Although the evidence was only circumstantial, detectives still believed in James' involvement in the case and decided to arrest him. James was taken into custody, and the prosecution announced its intention to seek the death penalty. Despite James continuing to deny guilt, the case still went to trial. The prosecution presented its theories, highlighting James' frequent outdoor activities with his dog, which had earned him the trust of local children, including Jessica. According to police, James had met Jessica while walking his dog and had struck up a conversation. He offered to take her to McDonald's, and she agreed because she knew him. After the meal, James allegedly invited Jessica to his home. While his wife was away, evidence had shown that Jessica was actually at James's house that day, as fibers from his living room carpet were found on her clothes. The investigation revealed that James might have tried to attack Jessica, but something went wrong. Forensic evidence indicated that the killer had strangled Jessica with their bare hands and pressed their palms against her face, possibly to silence her if she tried to scream. Panicked, the killer then placed Jessica's body in a trash bag and transported it to their car without arousing suspicion from the neighbors. The killer dumped her body near a water station, called 911 from a nearby gas station, and returned home. During the preliminary hearings, James's attorneys attempted to defend the evidence, arguing that there was no concrete proof of James' guilt. Although the judge accepted the evidence, the defense pointed out that in murder cases, the standard of proof is higher and more direct. Therefore, the possibility that James could avoid the death penalty was very large. A plea agreement was offered to James based on the circumstances surrounding the case. The deal required him to plead guilty to second-degree murder and accept a sentence of 40 years in prison without parole, thereby avoiding the death penalty. 2 years after the murder, in the summer of 1998, James accepted the deal. Although he was not required to provide details about the crime, he said that one of the reasons he accepted the deal was to spare Jessica's family the torment of the trial. The prosecution believed James showed genuine remorse for his actions and used the 911 call as evidence. The purpose of the call was unclear, but it suggested James was trying to alleviate his guilt. However, Jessica's parents were not satisfied with this deal because they had hoped for the death penalty and wanted James to confess to the crime. Despite this, James remained silent about the details of his actions. James did not fully serve his sentence. He died in November 2011 at the age of 49 from health problems, taking with him details of his crimes and motives. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Samantha Josephson. Samantha Josephson was born to Seymour and Marcy Josephson in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. She majored in political science at the University of South Carolina. She plans to attend Drexel University School of Law with the goal of specializing in international law. Samantha received a full scholarship to Drexel University and a partial scholarship to Rutgers University, and hopes to pursue a career in international law. Samantha was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority and had the opportunity to study abroad in Barcelona. While in South Carolina, she also visited Madrid and Paris. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg. Samantha and Greg communicated regularly through text messages and phone calls every day whenever possible. Even though Samantha was about to enter law school, they still planned to build a future together. Greg planned to move in with her and support her. However, everything changed on Friday, March 29, 2019, when Samantha did not return to her apartment. On March 28, 2019, Samantha decided to hang out with her roommate and friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Although her boyfriend, Greg, was unable to come along, the group visited several bars before ending up at the Bird Dog Bar in 5 Points, a popular place for students to socialize. Samantha was hanging out with friends, but she kept texting her boyfriend, Greg. She wanted him to drive to Columbia to be with her. However, they had plans to meet up the following weekend, so Greg decided not to go to Columbia with her. He kept in regular contact with Samantha. Around 2 a.m., Samantha left and returned to her apartment alone. She called an Uber to get home. Samantha was waiting for an Uber. While waiting, she talked to Greg on the phone at around 2:04 a.m. and told him she was on her way home. She had used Uber many times before to get to and from bars. Shortly after requesting a ride, A car pulled up at the curb where Samantha walked up to the car, realized it wasn't hers, and then turned around to return to her spot on the sidewalk. She was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After some time, a black Chevrolet Impala pulled up in front of Samantha. She said goodbye to Greg, assuming the Impala was her ride. She opened the door, exchanged a quick word with the driver, and got into the back seat. The car sped off immediately. Meanwhile, the actual Uber she had ordered arrived at the pickup location, but the driver couldn't find Samantha and eventually canceled the request and left. The black Chevrolet Impala circled the area several times before targeting Samantha. This behavior suggests that the driver was aware of the college students who congregated on 5 Point streets after the bars closed, waiting for the car to leave. Meanwhile, Samantha's boyfriend, Greg, had been tracking her movements using the Find My Friends app to make sure she got home safely. He noticed that she was moving in the opposite direction of her apartment, which initially did not raise any concerns because he thought she might be visiting a friend. However, when he texted her to check in, he received no response. Greg tried calling Samantha, but she didn't answer. He sent her multiple texts, but they showed up as delivered, not read. This meant Samantha wasn't reading his messages. Her phone's location stopped sharing, which surprised Greg because it had never happened before. He thought maybe she had left her phone in the Uber. Concerned, Greg contacted her friends and roommate to see if they had heard from her or if she had made it home safely. However, no one had any news about her whereabouts. Greg decided to rest, hoping Samantha would show up tomorrow morning. The next morning, Samantha was missing. Her roommates filed a missing person report. Her boyfriend, Greg, drove 2 hours to Colombia to help search for her. Shortly after the report was filed, a group of turkey hunters found the body of a young woman in a wooded area in New Zion, about 65 miles from 5 Points. The hunters immediately called 911 after the discovery, and the local sheriff's office quickly dispatched deputies to the scene. The body was later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson. An autopsy revealed that Samantha's body had more than 120 separate stab wounds, affecting multiple areas, including her face, head, neck, arms, torso, legs, and feet. In an attempt to defend herself, her fingernails were severely damaged as she tried to evade a sharp object. Evidence suggested a double-edged knife had been used, and she had then been dragged into the woods. An autopsy revealed that her body contained only 20 milliliters of blood. Samantha had suffered severe blood loss. Police quickly obtained surveillance footage from the bar the night of the incident, which showed Samantha getting into a black Chevrolet Impala. The footage showed the car circling the block several times. Police discovered that Samantha had accidentally gotten into the killer's car, thinking it was her Uber. The Uber that Samantha had called arrived a short time later. However, when the driver realized that Samantha was not there, he canceled the ride and left. Police believe that the suspect may have used a childproof lock to lock her inside, as when the childproof lock is on, the doors can only be opened from the outside of the car, so Samantha would not have been able to get out at that point. A description of the vehicle was released to the public in hopes of identifying the perpetrator, and shortly after, police spotted a black Chevrolet Impala during a 3 a.m. patrol on March 30th, while patrolling the area where Samantha was abducted. When the police stopped the car, the driver immediately jumped out and started running. After a short chase, he was arrested. When police checked his ID, they discovered that the man arrested was Nathaniel Rowland, 24, of New Zion. During a search of the vehicle, patrol officers discovered a child car seat in the back, surrounded by blood stains. This discovery prompted them to call for backup, as police suspected it was a crime scene. Homicide detectives were called to investigate and conducted a thorough search of the vehicle. They discovered multiple blood stains on the passenger seat and in the trunk, as well as a bloody footprint on one of the rear windows. Samantha's cell phone was found on the floor of the car. Police later discovered that Nathaniel had tried to sell it to a pawn shop earlier that day, but he had refused their offer of $125 and left the phone in the car. Police also found that the child locks were activated, which Nathaniel had used to lock Samantha inside. Several cleaning products, including bleach, window cleaner, and antibacterial wipes, were found in the car. Nathaniel had cleaned his car, but there was still a trace of blood in the car. During questioning, Nathaniel repeatedly denied any involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. He maintained his innocence. Police searching Nathaniel's body discovered traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails. However, no DNA from Nathaniel was found on Samantha's body. Police pieced together the evidence and speculated that Samantha was the victim of a sudden and violent attack. The fact that the child-proof locks in the car were still active at the time of Nathaniel's arrest led them to conclude that he must have activated the feature as soon as Samantha got into the car. Nathaniel suddenly stabbed her multiple times with a double-edged knife. Taken by surprise by the brutality of the attack, she struggled to fend off the blows, which explains the multiple stab wounds to her hands and the severe damage to her fingernails. Samantha was attacked by Nathaniel, who scratched Nathaniel's hand, leaving skin cells under her fingernails as evidence. After the attack, Nathaniel drove to a remote road in New Zion and dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. Upon returning home, Nathaniel posted on social media, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Nathaniel's neighborhood is minutes away from where Samantha's body was found. A background check on Nathaniel showed that he attended South Carolina State University in 2017. However, there is no record of him graduating and it is unclear what job he was doing at the time of the incident. Nathaniel was previously arrested for assaulting and robbing a woman in October 2018. Police searched Nathaniel's girlfriend, Maria Howard's apartment in New Zion, where he was living. They found evidence in a trash can behind the apartment, including a sock and towel with blood stains on it, which belonged to Nathaniel. The blood was later determined to be Samantha's. Police also discovered a blood-stained white cloth, duct tape, bleach wipes with blood on them, and a double-edged knife with obvious blood stains. Tests later confirmed that blood found on the double-edged knife, bed sheets, car, and bleach wipes matched Samantha Josephson. Nathaniel was charged with kidnapping and murder. The trial took place. Nathaniel maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence against him. In the summer of 2021, Nathaniel's defense team argued that he was innocent, as there was no DNA of his on Samantha. Prosecutors countered Nathaniel's claim of innocence with a large amount of evidence gathered in the case. Key evidence included CCTV footage showing Nathaniel's car picking up Samantha in 5 points and driving away, as well as several incriminating physical pieces of evidence found in his car. Additionally, cell phone tracking showed that Nathaniel and Samantha's phones were in the same location at the time of the murder. Furthermore, Nathaniel lived near where Samantha's body was discovered. The prosecution presented 31 witnesses, including a person who saw Nathaniel cleaning the murder weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he tried to sell Samantha's cell phone, and Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend, who claimed that her daughter had blood on her shoes after being in Nathaniel's car. After the murder, Nathaniel did not contact any witnesses to testify in his favor, and no members of Nathaniel's family came forward to defend him. Despite this, Nathaniel maintained his innocence and appealed to the judge. The jury deliberated for only an hour before returning a guilty verdict, and Nathaniel was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Stewart. Lauren Stewart was born on January 9, 1973. She has spent most of her life in Michigan. Lauren pursued her passions as a model and actress, attending workshops and interacting with photographers to further her career. Those who know her describe her as charming and easygoing. Lauren is passionate about her acting and modeling work. She enjoys new experiences, learning from others and sharing ideas, seeing life as an adventure and striving to live life to the fullest. Lauren is married to Daniel Stewart, a senior software architect at the University of Michigan, where he works predicting heart attacks. Prior to his current role, Daniel spent several years in the tech industry as a Coda developer. Lauren and Daniel were devout Christians in the Jehovah's Witnesses sect for a long time until 2013, when they decided to leave Christianity. Lauren and Daniel have 2 children, Stephen Stewart, 27, a data solutions architect and computer scientist, and Bethany Stewart, 24, a talented artist and graphic designer. At 45, Lauren seems to have the perfect life, a loving husband, well-educated children, a thriving modeling career, and a beautiful home in Keio Harbor. But deep inside, Lauren struggled with the emotional pain of being shunned and rejected by the Jehovah's Witness community she grew up in. The strict rules and practices of shunning former members took their toll on her. Lauren and Daniel's decision to leave the faith was a difficult one. The Laurens remained devout Jehovah's Witnesses until 2013, but the church's strict rules posed problems for their children's futures. Celebrating holidays was forbidden and higher education was prohibited, with the threat of expulsion for non-compliance. When Daniel asked for his children to attend university, he was warned that defying church policy would result in expulsion, which was distressing for the family as it meant complete social isolation, even from relatives. Lauren's family made the decision to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses after careful consideration. While the decision initially seemed right, they soon faced strong opposition from their community, which became unbearable, especially for Lauren. She found that even simple tasks like going shopping became difficult due to hostile looks and hurtful comments from former friends. Although these comments were not directed at her, they were said loudly enough for her to hear. Living in a small community of 3,300 residents, many of whom were Jehovah's Witnesses, Lauren's family faced a harsh reality, with prominent church members constantly reminding Lauren of her outcast status. The emotional stress eventually became too much to bear. Lauren turned to exercise to regain her health. She worked out regularly and made it her routine, which led to a dramatic change. Lauren became a fitness trainer and found success as a model. Despite being rejected by the church, Lauren appeared optimistic and confident to those around her. However, behind her pleasant exterior, Lauren was secretly struggling with chronic depression. She had been battling this condition for some time, and it had gotten worse since being ostracized by the church. As a result, Lauren often hid her true feelings behind a fake smile. Lauren's family was drowning in debt, on the brink of bankruptcy. Overwhelmed by the pressure of her own financial difficulties and emotional pain, Lauren devised a plan to solve all her problems at once. She began researching ways to end her life and videos on how to use a pistol. On February 15, 2018, Lauren left a heartbreaking note on the dining room table, meticulously cleaned the house, and sent messages to loved ones and Daniel's boss. And finally, Lauren flipped through all the family photos on her desk. Lauren texted her husband's boss at 9:24 a.m. saying that her husband Daniel had died in an accident and that she would provide more information later. However, she did not respond to her boss's subsequent messages. At 5:07 p.m. that same day, Lauren texted her cousin, saying that she was taking her family with her so they wouldn't have to suffer. She said that they would sleep until Christ was resurrected and hoped that her cousin would do better than her. Her cousin was frightened by the message and told Lauren not to harm herself or her family. Lauren had been suffering from mental health issues in recent months that her family had not known about. She had a gun and made the tragic decision to use it to kill her loved ones. Lauren's first victim was her husband, Daniel, 47, who was shot in the head while trying to escape from the basement where he was relaxing. Lauren used a pillow as a silencer to muffle the sound of the gunshot. After Daniel was shot, Lauren went upstairs to her daughter Bethany's sleeping room. Lauren shot her at point-blank range, instantly killing Bethany. Next, her son Stephen, who had his own house on the other side of town, Lauren tricked Stephen into coming to her house. When Stephen was busy with the task his mother had assigned him, his back turned, Lauren shot him at close range. The horror did not stop there. Lauren killed the family dog, placing its body in the bathtub. A neighbor heard these gunshots but thought someone was slamming the door. When the house became a cold morgue, Lauren meticulously cleaned it. Then Lauren used the gun to kill herself. Lauren's cousin, who had been trying to contact her, became concerned when she did not respond to their messages. The cousin decided to visit Lauren's home the following morning, February 16th, with a friend. When no one answered the door, they contacted the police. Upon arriving at the house, the police found the kitchen to be tidy and well organized, with a stocked refrigerator and handwritten labels on various items. A calendar was also hanging on the refrigerator. However, police discovered the family dog dead in the bathtub. This made police more cautious, initially fearing the possibility of an active shooter. As they continued to search the house, they found Stephen Stewart on the floor, shot while sitting on a chair in another room. In a bedroom, the police discovered Bethany's lifeless body, shot while she was asleep. A pillow had been used to muffle the sound of the gunshot, and the pillowcase showed signs of the shooting. The police also found Daniel Stewart's body on the basement floor in front of a couch, with his right hand still in his jeans pocket. Elsewhere in the house, Lauren was found at the foot of the stairs, with a pistol next to her and a gunshot wound between her eyes. 2 notes were discovered on the dining room table, one addressed to the medical examiner, the other a suicide note revealing Lauren's inner struggles. Lauren's note explained that she felt she had allowed evil into her heart by rejecting God's love. She believed that by killing her family, she could spare them from suffering. Through interviews with relatives, friends, and neighbors, it became clear that the couple had become reclusive after leaving the Jehovah's Witness church. Lauren's past struggles, particularly her battle with depression, were compounded by the stress of motherhood. Family members also revealed that Lauren, who was one of 11 siblings, had a history of depression that likely contributed to her actions. Lauren has become increasingly obsessed with her faith in recent years. Her family, including her father and sister, have not spoken to her in years. Lauren's mother died when she was 13. The tragic event has left a lasting impact on those close to the family. Joyce Taylor, a longtime friend, believes the murders were a direct result of the family's rejection by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Joyce Taylor and other former members reveal the harsh reality of leaving the faith. When someone leaves the Jehovah's Witnesses, they are often shunned by their own family members who remain in the church. This severe form of shunning can take a heavy emotional toll. According to Joyce Taylor, Lauren and Daniel's desire to give their children a college education conflicted with the church's teachings, which discourage such pursuits. This clash between their aspirations and the church's rigid doctrines ultimately led to a tragic outcome. The family was shunned in every way possible. As Joyce Taylor explained, when you're raised a Jehovah's Witness, the church controls many aspects of your life, including your friendships and associations. If you go against these rules, you risk being disfellowshipped or shunned. Joyce Taylor stormed into a Kingdom Hall meeting in Union Lake, seizing the opportunity to confront the congregation about a recent tragedy. She passionately criticized the gathering, her voice filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. 5 years ago, you withdrew your support from a small family, Joyce Taylor exclaimed. They had no one else to turn to, but you turned them away and shunned them. Why? Because they wanted to raise their children as they saw fit. "Just 2 days ago, 4 people died because of your alienation," Joyce Taylor said. Her words sent shockwaves through the room, forcing her to push away members of her congregation as she expressed her pent-up frustration. Police investigations into Lauren's family revealed that she, her husband, and her sons were all using cannabis. Further investigation revealed that Lauren's horrific actions were the result of a combination of factors. These included feelings of loneliness, strained relationships with family and friends due to their differing religious views. These factors combined to add to her pain, ultimately leading her to commit a horrific act. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Brianna Zunino Dennison. Brianna Zunino Dennison, born March 29, 1988. Brianna's parents are Jeff and Bridget Dennison. When Brianna was 6, her father passed away, causing immense pain for the family. However, with the support of her loved ones, she persevered through the difficult time. Brianna spent her childhood in Reno, Nevada, and Mendocino, California, her mother's hometown. Her love of travel and exploration took her to numerous countries, including Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and France. Brianna has a deep affection for children and animals, especially her dog Ozzy. She completed her high school education at Reno High School in 2006 and is majoring in child psychology as a sophomore at Santa Barbara City College. During winter break, on January 20, 2008, Brianna returned to her hometown of Reno from Santa Barbara to spend time with friends and family. Brianna and her friends regularly attended events organized by Summer Winter Action Tours LLC, a tour company that caters to college students. They also attended the Martin Luther King Jr. Gala weekend in Reno. That day, Brianna returned home around 4 a.m. to her friend's house near the University of Nevada campus. Brianna slept over at McKay Court's house. However, when McKay Court woke up the next morning at around 9 a.m., Brianna was no longer there. A small bloodstain was found on the pillow where she had slept, and her cell phone, purse, and shoes were still at the house. McKay Court then contacted Brianna's parents and the local police in an attempt to locate Brianna. Police arrived and examined the scene. In the following days, police conducted forensic tests at the McKay Court home, where Brianna had been staying at the time of her abduction. During the investigation, police discovered DNA on the doorknob that belonged to an unidentified male. The blood on the pillow was confirmed to be Brianna's, leading police to focus on a theory that Brianna had been abducted. Police searched for Brianna in the University of Nevada Reno area, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the search. A DNA sample found on a doorknob the night Brianna disappeared was matched to at least 2 previous sex crimes in the same area. One occurred on November 13, and the other on December 16, 2007. On January 29, 2008, a Reno woman said she knew a victim who had been held at gunpoint in a garage on the University of Nevada Reno campus in October 2007. Police released a description of the suspect based on identifying information provided by women who were sexually assaulted by the suspect. In an effort to find Brianna's abductor, police interviewed nearly 100 sex offenders who lived within a mile of the McKay Court home. However, none of them were linked to Brianna's disappearance. A search effort was organized, with some 1,700 volunteers, including then First Lady of Nevada Dawn Gibbons, participating in a virtual search of the area. Sadly, the search yielded no results. On February 15, 2008, a man named Albert Jimenez was returning from his lunch break at a Subway restaurant in Reno. As he walked down the street, he noticed bright orange sheets standing out among a pile of discarded tree branches in a ditch near Reno Business Park. Upon closer inspection, Albert discovered that the orange socks on the feet belonged to a deceased woman. Albert had heard about Brianna Dennison's disappearance but initially thought the description did not match the person on Brianna's missing person flyer. Without a cell phone, Albert rushed back to his workplace to contact the police to report the incident. Police arrived at the scene and confirmed the victim's identity as Brianna Dennison. The investigation revealed that Brianna had been brutally attacked and murdered. Near her body, police found a pair of panties, which contained DNA from the perpetrator and DNA from an unidentified woman. Police suspected that the panties did not belong to Brianna, believing that they had been left there to distract police. Police then made a public appeal, asking anyone who recognized the panties to come forward to help identify the perpetrator. However, no one came forward. On November 25, 2008, James Michael Bella, 27, of Sparks, Nevada, James was arrested while he was taking his son to the Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno. He was booked into the Washoe County Jail on charges of murder, first-degree kidnapping, and sexual assault. Further investigation revealed that James was a former Marine with a history of violence, including a 2001 arrest for threatening his ex-girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. The following day, November 26, 2008, the Reno Police Department held a press conference to confirm that James' DNA matched the DNA found at Brianna's crime scene. During the press conference, it was also revealed that a friend of James' girlfriend anonymously accused James, through the Secret Witness program on November 1, 2008, after James' girlfriend confided in the friend that she had found underwear in James's truck while they were returning from Washington, where James had taken a job in March 2008. After reports of Brianna's case appeared in the media, including a police sketch of the suspect and a description of a vehicle involved in a similar incident a month earlier, police began questioning James, anonymously provided by a witness. However, James denied any wrongdoing and refused to provide a DNA sample for analysis. His girlfriend was also questioned by police, and she allowed them to take a DNA sample from her and James' 4-year-old son. DNA testing of James' son showed that, in this case, James' DNA was left at the house where Brianna was abducted and at the scene of the rape. Furthermore, during the trip to Washington, it was discovered that James had sold his truck in Idaho, which matched the description of the vehicle used in the sexual assault. Police announced at a press conference that the truck was being transported back to Reno for a thorough examination and would be used as evidence in the case against James. On May 27, 2010, the jury returned a guilty verdict in James's trial, finding James responsible for the murder of Brianna Dennison. After 9 hours of deliberations, the jury convicted James of kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. In an effort to avoid the death penalty, James' defense team presented mitigating circumstances, citing James' traumatic childhood with an alcoholic, abusive father. The jurors rejected the mitigating factors and gave James the death sentence instead. Later, on July 30, 2010, James received 4 more life sentences for other crimes, including rape and kidnapping of 2 victims prior to Brianna's abduction and murder. James's appeals have been denied over. The case of Brianna Zunino Dennison is a story of pain, strength, and determination in the pursuit of justice. Brianna's family remains strong and persistent in the fight for justice. The collective efforts of everyone together make a safer world. And may Brianna rest in peace. Thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Georgia Williams. Georgia Williams was born on September 17, 1995, in Telford, Shropshire, England. She grew up in a close and loving family with her parents, Lynette and Steve Williams, and her older sister Scarlett. From an early age, Georgia demonstrated a kind and thoughtful nature, consistently looking for ways to help others and make those around her happy. This admirable quality eventually becomes her weakness. Despite being bullied in middle school, but Georgia's life improved in high school. She made a group of friends and became a well-liked and popular student. Her kind nature and good leadership skills helped her win the position of class monitor. She pursued her passion for helping others by joining the Air Cadets Corps with the ultimate goal of becoming a medical officer in the Royal Air Force. At 17, Georgia started working at a local gas station where she quickly became friends with her co-workers. One of them was Jamie Reynolds, a 22-year-old man who seemed quiet and isolated from the rest of the group. Georgia, being a kind and caring person, reached out to Jamie in friendship, wanting to help him feel less alone. Thanks to her efforts, Jamie started to fit in at work, participating in group activities and making friends with his co-workers. As time went on, Jamie developed strong feelings for Georgia, seeing her as the only person who had shown him kindness and believed in him. Feeling hopeful, Jamie started to think that maybe Georgia felt the same way about him. Emboldened by his newfound confidence, he mustered the nerve to express his true feelings to Georgia and inquired if she would be open of a romantic relationship. However, Georgia, being considerate of Jamie's feelings, let him down gently. She explained that she didn't want to ruin their friendship by getting romantically involved. Jamie seems to respect Georgia's choice and tries to maintain their friendship. However, he is actually harboring an increasingly unhealthy obsession with her. One day, while they were working together at the gas station, Jamie opened up to Georgia about his unhappiness with his life. He told her that he wanted to quit his job and pursue his true passions. Jamie had always dreamed of turning his passions into a career, and Georgia was eager to support him. One day, they started talking about his hobbies, and Jamie revealed his love for photography. Georgia saw an opportunity and encouraged Jamie to pursue it as a career. Excited about the idea, Jamie asked Georgia to help him create a professional portfolio and asked if she would be his first model. Georgia, being a good friend, agreed to help. They scheduled a photo shoot for Sunday, May 26, 2013, at Jamie's parents' house, with a few mutual friends joining in. However, as the day approached, Georgia found herself in a difficult situation. Her family was hosting a barbecue, and her grandparents, whom she hadn't seen in a long time, would be attending. Georgia thought about canceling the photo shoot at the last minute, but she didn't want to let Jamie down. She decided to keep her commitment and assured her family that she would only be a short drive away. She planned to quickly take a few photos and then return to her family's barbecue, hoping to make both her friend and family happy. On that day, Georgia got ready quickly, doing her hair and makeup, and wearing jeans and a leather jacket. Her father complimented her as she left home at 7:30 p.m., saying she looked beautiful, like Sandy from Greece. Georgia's family expected her to return home soon. However, as the hours went by and she didn't come home, her loved ones started to worry. At first, her mother wasn't too concerned, thinking Georgia was probably just busy with the photo shoot or spending time with friends. She sent a text asking when the photo shoot would end. Georgia replied, saying it had already ended and that she was with friends and might be home late. Her mother wasn't worried after getting the text, as it seemed like a typical message from Georgia, with the usual 3 kissy face emojis at the end. Georgia's mother trusted her to be responsible, which is why she wasn't worried at first. As the night went on, Georgia's parents went to bed, thinking she would be home by morning. However, when they woke up the next day and Georgia still hadn't returned, they started to feel uneasy. Georgia's mother sent her a text message at 6:30 a.m. asking where she was. But it wasn't until 7:30 a.m. that a response arrived, saying George had spent the night at a friend's house and her phone battery was running out. The message said that if George didn't respond again, it was because her phone had died. George's mother was unaware that the messages were not written by her daughter. On May 27th, George's parents thought she would come home after a music festival. They expected her to come home the next morning because she was excited about her first driving lesson. As the night went on and George didn't come home, her parents became more and more anxious. They stayed up late waiting for her, but there was no sign of her. They contacted relatives and friends to see if anyone had heard from George, but no one had seen or heard from her in days. This makes them even more insecure and unsure of what is going on. When Georgia failed to return home the next morning for her scheduled driving lesson, her family quickly reported her missing to the police. They gave the police all the information they had, but they only knew that Georgia had been to a photo shoot at Jamie Reynolds' home and nothing about her whereabouts after that. The police started investigating and focused on Jamie Reynolds. What they found out about him was alarming and raised concerns for Georgia's safety. It turns out that in 2008, Jamie got into trouble with the law for assaulting and attempting to strangle a teenager. Despite the seriousness of the incident, he was let off with a warning and not charged. When the police discovered this, they suspected Jamie even more and considered him the main suspect in Georgia's disappearance. They went to his home, but no one answered. They broke in. They searched the premises but couldn't find Jamie, so prompting a large-scale manhunt to track him down. After conducting a thorough investigation at the petrol station, it was clear that none of Jamie and Georgia's co-workers had seen them. Their absence from work was unusual and raised concerns, as it was out of character for both of them. Although Jamie's parents were away on vacation, but they had already given the authorities key details about Jamie's van, such as its registration information. The police in Shropshire quickly shared this information with police agencies nationwide, asking them to be on the lookout for the van. Soon, authorities located Jamie in Glasgow, Scotland, which is 428 miles away from his home. His abrupt departure from the country, which came without warning, raised concerns and hinted at a potential problem. On May 30th, police in Glasgow arrested Jamie Reynolds at a local hotel due to suspicions of kidnapping Georgia. They immediately questioned him about Georgia's location, but Jamie claimed he didn't know where she was and provided no useful information to the investigators. He was then taken to Shropshire for more questioning. Meanwhile, Georgia's family and friends waited nervously for news, but what they heard about the investigation was deeply upsetting. The lack of progress was crushing, making their pain even worse. With Jamie in custody as the main suspect, the police searched his home for evidence. During the search, they found a camera with an SD card, but their hopes of finding important clues were crushed when they discovered that all the files had been deleted. The camera was sent to the police station for forensic analysis, where experts worked to recover the deleted files. Eventually, they managed to retrieve the data, revealed a shocking secret to the investigation. Among the recovered files are several images taken on the day Georgia went missing, providing a haunting look at she's final moments. The initial photos showed Georgia in normal poses at the start of the photo shoot, confirming she was at Jamie's residence that day. Although she appeared content and cooperative, it was clear Georgia had no idea about Jamie's sinister intentions. Sadly, she unintentionally entered a hazardous situation without realizing the risks, which ultimately led to her tragic death. As authorities went through the images, the tone became increasingly dark and unsettling. Subsequent photos reveal a series of harrowing incidents, depicting a distressed Georgia stripped of her clothes, standing weakly on a red recycling bin. Her hands appear to be tied behind her back with a rope hanging ominously above her. The footage captured Jamie Reynolds' horrific act. He filmed Georgia's final moments, showing her desperate struggle for breath. He later committed heinous acts of necrophilia, violating her lifeless body in various rooms of the house. Jamie's parents' bed was where he further compounded the horror. He took hundreds of additional photos showing Georgia in degrading positions, documenting his depravity. He stripped her of her jewelry, keeping them as trophies of his horrific crime. The police conducted a thorough search of Jamie's home and found a large collection of explicit photographs and videos, including content that depicted extreme violence, sexual assault, and murder. It was discovered that Jamie was not only in possession of these materials, but also actively involved in creating content that featured violent acts. Jamie's parents were alerted to their son's disturbing interests and immediately ended their vacation to meet with authorities. They revealed that Jamie had been exposed to violent and explicit content from the age of 14. It is possible that he was exposed to such content even earlier. Although his parents tried to intervene by blocking access to certain websites, Jamie found a way to circumvent their efforts. At the age of 14, he contacted the internet provider and set up his own private Wi-Fi connection, which allowed him to continue accessing the blocked websites without his parents' knowledge. When Jamie's parents first found out he was watching these videos, they became worried and contacted the police and Child Protective Services. However, the authorities said they couldn't take any action because watching such content wasn't against the law. As the police looked into the matter further, they found a set of notebooks containing 40 separate stories written by Jamie. These stories were centered around harming, sexually assaulting, and murdering women. Additionally, investigators discovered that Jamie had searched social media platforms, printed and marked images of young girls with nooses around their necks. One of the stories, titled "Georgia Williams Surprised," has a very similar plot to the incidents that led to Georgia's death. Authorities believe this narrative may have been a pre-planned scenario, intended to be carried out from the start. Jamie began writing this narrative in January and finished it just 3 weeks before the murder. Despite being questioned, Jamie refused to reveal the location of Georgia's body, insisting he was innocent. As a result, investigators had to painstakingly reconstruct Jamie's movements from the Monday morning after Georgia's murder. They started by reviewing surveillance footage of Jamie refueling his vehicle at a petrol station. Unbeknownst to them at the time, Georgia's body was hidden in the back of Jamie's van. After refueling, Jamie drove 60 miles to a movie theater, leaving Georgia's body in the van parked in the theater's lot. He then went inside to watch a movie. However, police lost track of Jamie after he left the theater and issued a public appeal for help finding him. The appeal was successful, with people reporting sightings of Jamie's van near the New York G Mountain Pass. The area, with its dense woods and muddy terrain, was where Jamie tried to evade capture. Locals remembered Jamie in his van, especially after it got stuck in the mud and Good Samaritans helped him get it out. Police followed up on this lead and searched the wooded area where Jamie was spotted. Unfortunately, they found Georgia's naked body in this secluded spot. Georgia's body was returned to Shropshire after being recovered. A post-mortem examination revealed she died from asphyxiation due to a ligature around her neck. Forensic analysis also showed bruising on her back, indicating Jamie had used his knee to press her down. Initially, Jamie denied any involvement in Georgia's murder, but on the first day of his trial in December 2013, he suddenly stood up and pleaded guilty to all charges. During the trial, Georgia's father gave a heartfelt address to the court. They had to endure the pain for a long time as they witnessed their daughter's body lying motionless in the hospital's rest house, a traumatic experience that haunted both him and his wife. The trial also uncovered Jamie's previous run-ins with the law. In 2008, he received a warning from a judge for keeping a 1-year-old girl captive in his home. A disturbing incident foreshadowing Georgia's tragic death. In 2011, Jamie was criticized for recklessly backing his car into a girl's vehicle. This incident occurred after the girl had turned down his romantic advances. Although the case was eventually closed, Judge Mr. Justice Wilkie expressed serious concerns about Jamie's behavior, calling him a sexual deviant and warning about his potential to become a dangerous serial offender. As a result, Jamie received a whole life term, a sentence typically reserved for the most severe crimes, meaning he would spend the rest of his life in prison without parole. At the time, Jamie was the 46th person to receive this sentence and the youngest person in history to be given a whole life term. During sentencing, Judge Justice Wilkie highlighted the extreme suffering Georgia endured, emphasizing the torturous nature of her experience. Jamie's obsession with violent and sadistic pornography had led to a horrific display of control over his victim, ultimately resulting in her tragic death. Jamie Reynolds hung his head in shame as Georgia's parents and sister listened to the disturbing details of her death and the abuse she suffered at his hands. The courtroom was extremely tense as the jury saw gruesome images of Georgia's final moments, causing her family to leave in distress. In 2014, Jamie tried to appeal his life sentence but was unsuccessful. A review of the case the following year criticized police officers, children's services, and mental health professionals for their handling of Jamie before Georgia's murder. The review found that these agencies failed to work together properly, despite Jamie having come to the attention of law enforcement 5 years earlier for attempting to strangle another girl. Georgia's parents were deeply saddened by the report, regretting the missed chances to intervene and prevent their daughter's death. They stated that they cried when they read about the agency's failures, as it was clear that Jamie was likely to commit murder. They believed that Georgia's death could have been prevented. Outside the courtroom, Georgia's father shared the family's overwhelming sadness, stating that no sentence could ever satisfy them because it wouldn't bring Georgia back to life. He emphasized that their loss was irreparable and that Jamie, despite his lengthy prison sentence, still had the one thing he took from their daughter, life. He noted that what to cause them grief is that Jamie, even while serving a life sentence, still gets to live. Jamie Reynolds remains in prison to this day. Georgia's mother, Lynette, later wrote a book titled Our Georgia, in which she shared the family's traumatic experiences. The book highlights the failures of the legal system that allowed Jamie, a violent film enthusiast, to remain at large and eventually commit murder. This book is a heartfelt tribute to Georgia and provides an insight into the devastating aftermath of her tragic passing. Georgia's death caused immense pain to those who loved her, leaving a huge gap that can never be filled. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Ewell family. Dale Ewell was born in Ohio during the Great Depression. This challenging time in him the value of hard work and the importance of money, as he learned to appreciate every dollar he made. His family struggled financially, which likely motivated him to become determined and ambitious. Dale married Glee Michelle, a multi-talented woman, who worked as an elementary school teacher, a translator for the CIA, and served on a commission at the State Bar of California. They had 2 children, Tiffany born in 1967 and Dana in 1971. Dale's success provided the Ewell family with a comfortable life, including a home in Sunnyside, a beachfront property in Peraro Dunes, luxury cars, and designer clothing. After serving in the Air Force, Dale became a successful businessman. He eventually became the president and owner of Western Piper Sales Incorporated, a company that sold small aircraft. The primary source of the Ewell income came from selling light aircraft and investing heavily in the stock market. After establishing a successful aviation business, Dale expanded into buying several farms, accumulating substantial wealth. Together, Dale and Glee were worth an estimated $8 million, embodying the American dream. Despite their wealth, they lived modestly. Their children chose different directions in life. Tiffany pursued a similar career to her parents, whereas Dana chose a distinctly different route. At university, Dana presented himself as a successful entrepreneur, falsely claiming to be the source of his family's wealth. This fabricated story gained attention from a local newspaper and was even included in his school yearbook. In 1990, while attending Santa Clara University, Dana was fixated on wealth and luxury. He owned a BMW and had access to funds, allowing him to indulge in expensive items like jewelry. From a young age, Dana had a habit of lying and making up stories. Despite being intelligent and well-educated, Dana's ambitions went beyond comfort, wealth, and a promising future. He had the same ambitions as his father, but he didn't have the drive to achieve them in a proper and lawful way. Dana began fabricating elaborate and false stories about his accomplishments and importance while he was a student at the University of Santa Clara. He lied to both faculty and peers, claiming he was the head of a multi-million-dollar company. His false narrative included starting as a stockbroker at 18, moving to aircraft sales, and eventually becoming president of his own aircraft manufacturing company. The tension between Dana and his father, Dale, was largely unknown to others. Dana's tall tales may have caused his father embarrassment and contributed to their conflicts. Despite Dale's humble beginnings and generous support for his children, Dana seemed to have an excessive sense of entitlement. Dana Ewell presented himself as excessively self-centered and arrogant, prioritizing his wealth and social standing above all else. On Easter Sunday, April 19, 1992, the weather in Sunnyside, California was mild with partial sunshine, resulting in a pleasant afternoon. Dale, 59, spent the Easter weekend at his beach house with his 57-year-old wife, Glee, and their 24-year-old daughter, Tiffany. Glee and Tiffany returned to their home in Sunnyside by car, while Dale flew his private plane to his hangar and then drove home. When they arrived, they were ambushed. Tiffany was shot in the head and killed, followed by Glee, who was shot multiple times. The killers stayed in the house, waiting for Dale to arrive. 30 minutes later, Dale arrived home and was also fatally shot as he entered the house from the garage. 2 days later, Dana, the youngest member of the family, tried to contact his parents but was unable to reach them. Dana had spent the Easter weekend in San Francisco with his girlfriend and her father, an FBI agent. On April 21, 1992, the family's housekeeper, Juanita, arrived at the house for work and found Tiffany's body lying in a pool of blood in the kitchen. Juanita was distraught and sought help from a neighbor, who called the police. Meanwhile, Dana was still in Monterey, California. At the time of the murders, Dana was contacted by the authorities. His girlfriend's father quickly arranged for him to fly to Fresno, and Dana was visibly upset during this time. The police then started a thorough investigation, spending many days collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. The crime scene was made to look like a robbery. However, experienced detectives believed the scene was deliberately staged to make it appear as though the family had been attacked and then killed by an intruder. Upon further examination, detectives found several irregularities, including the lack of weapons, bloodstains, footprints, or DNA evidence. Instead, the detectives found that the attack was carefully planned and carried out. The attacker was a skilled shooter, missing only one shot, and had even picked up the spent bullet casings inside the house. Investigators found a box of 9mm ammunition that Dale had purchased. It was later discovered that it had been used in the murder. The home appeared to have been ransacked, but nothing valuable was missing. There was no evidence of forced entry, and the alarm, which was usually turned on, had been turned off. Investigators thoroughly examined the victims' backgrounds, searching for any clues that might be connected to their deaths. They looked into Dale's past dealings, which included selling airplanes to an individual later convicted of drug smuggling in the 1970s, and a questionable real estate transaction with Dale's brother that potentially put investors at risk of losing millions. The police thoroughly investigated and eliminated all other potential suspects with motives, ultimately they concentrating on Dana, as he was the one who would benefit the most from the tragic event. As the only surviving member of the Ewell family and the main beneficiary of the estate, Dana naturally became a person of interest. Even though he had a solid alibi, having been with his girlfriend and her FBI agent father at the time of the murders, the police couldn't shake their suspicions about him. Dana's actions did not ease the concerns of others, but rather intensified their suspicions about his involvement in the murder. Although he outwardly showed distress and even offered a $50,000 reward for the capture of the killer, his grief seemed insincere. His reaction to the horrific killing of family members seemed surprisingly subdued, as he displayed little of the shock and sorrow that people typically exhibit in response to such a traumatic event. Instead of focusing on mourning the loss of his loved ones, Dana seemed more concerned with his parents' wills and inheritance. He did something disturbing, inviting a friend to view the house while there was still obvious blood on it, demonstrating a disregard for the victims. Furthermore, he allegedly expressed contempt for the police investigation, calling the investigators dummies who would never solve the case. Dana eluded authorities for 3 years, during which time they thoroughly investigated every lead to help solve the case. The situation worsened after Dale's brothers reported Dana to the authorities, claiming he had done something wrong. According to them, Dana became furious when he heard the will being read, as he learned that he wouldn't have full access to the $8 million estate until he was in his 30s. Dana reportedly slammed his hands on the table and screamed, asking why his father could do this to him. The trust stipulated that his parents would cover his expenses until he was 25, then he would receive investment dividends until he was 30. At 30, he would have access to half of the estate, with the remaining half available at 35. Before the funeral, the Ewell brothers act to prevent Dana from reclaiming what he believes is his. However, Dana managed to obtain around $300,000 from an insurance policy. Dana's uncles actively prevented him from inheriting his father's assets, causing him significant frustration. Despite the growing scrutiny from investigators and accusations from his own family members that he was involved in the murder to gain control of the family estate, Dana showed no signs of worry. He continued to live a lavish lifestyle, showering his girlfriend Monica with expensive gifts and even helping with her education costs. However, it was unclear where his money was coming from. Investigators suspected that money was a key factor in the murders and dug deeper. They discovered that Dana had been stealing money from various sources, including his grandmother's trust account, which had held $400,000. By the time detectives stepped in, the grandmother was left with only $22,000 to cover her care at a nursing home. The discovery that Dana had been exploiting his grandmother for personal gain further strengthened the police's suspicions about his character. However, authorities still need concrete evidence to prove Dana's involvement in the murder. Joel, one of Dana's college acquaintances, was particularly drawn to Dana's stories of a wealthy, successful lifestyle. Joel found Dana's apparent ability to effortlessly attract beautiful women especially intriguing. People around were surprised by their friendship, as they seemed to have little in common. Dana was driven by a desire for higher social status, while Joel's interests lay in video games, firearms, and explosives. Despite their differences, Joel's friendship with Dana gave him the opportunity to attend fancy parties and meet attractive women. Shortly after the Ewell family murders, Joel dropped out of school and soon became Dana's roommate in the Ewell family's former home. This marked a significant development in the investigation. Both Dana and Joel started making unusual purchases, such as helicopter flying lessons, despite Joel having no apparent source of income. As a result, investigators began surveilling both, monitoring their communications through pagers and payphones. Authorities cloned Dana's pager and tapped his landline in May 1993. An officer overheard Joel discussing the investigation on a payphone, saying, "They don't have evidence, they'll try to catch you in a lie." Meanwhile, Dana continued spending lavishly, buying a new car for his girlfriend and paying her law school tuition. After using up the insurance payout, he took $400,000 from his grandmother's account, leaving her with only $22,000 for her nursing home expenses. In 1994, investigators shifted their focus to forensic analysis, which revealed that the murder weapon was a rare 9mm assault rifle made in Colorado. Records from the company showed that a rifle had been bought by Jack Pond just before April 1992. Notably, Jack was a high school friend of Joel. When questioned, Jack first denied buying the rifle, then claimed he bought it as a birthday present for himself, and said the gun was later stolen. The evidence against Dana and Joel continued to mount. At one point, detectives visited Dana at his university dorm and told him they believed Joel was responsible for killing his family. Dana stayed silent, visibly pale. After the detectives departed, Dana and his girlfriend, Monica, promptly contacted Joel's brother, Radovic, but they did not realize that they were being followed by the police. On March 2, 1995, police arrested Dana, Joel, and Peter, Joel's brother, and Jack Pond. Peter had made a deal with the authorities, agreeing to testify against his younger brother and Dana in exchange for immunity. Peter confessed to the police that he had made a homemade silencer and attached it to the murder weapon. He also admitted to getting rid of the gun barrel, Joel's tennis shoes, and some gun magazines. Peter said he did these things with the help of Jack Pond. When Jack was arrested, he gave a different account of the gun. He said he bought the gun for Joel but didn't know it was going to be used for the murders. Jack also confirmed that he and Peter had disposed of evidence together. Jack received immunity in exchange for his testimony, just like Peter. As a result of statements made by Peter and Jack, the barrel of the murder weapon was found buried in a field in Rica. Unlike Peter and Jack, Dana and Joel were not offered plea deals. They were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, which made them eligible for the death penalty. The trial began in late 1997. Dana and Joel, who had previously been close friends and had even lived together in the house where the murders occurred, now had separate lawyers and took different stances during the trial. Prosecutors argued that Dana's motive for the murders was greed, claiming he had promised Joel a share of the inheritance. Dana's lawyer argued that he was innocent, suggesting that Joel and Jack had planned and carried out the murders. Joel's lawyer acknowledged the strong evidence against his client and focused on trying to save him from the death penalty. During the trial, Jack Pond testified that he had bought the murder weapon for Joel and helped dispose of it. He also said Joel had given him details of the incidents on the day of the murder, in April 1992. According to Jack, Dana had asked Joel for a favor that he found hard to refuse. Having taken steps to avoid leaving DNA evidence behind, Joel carried out Dana's plan by entering the Ewell residence. He shaved off all body hair and then waited 12 hours on a plastic sheet to minimize the risk of leaving any traces, including an eyelash. He was also instructed to retrieve all bullet casings. Tiffany was shot in the back of the head and died instantly, without seeing her killer. Glee, however, saw Joel and tried to escape to the office, but was shot and severely injured. Joel pursued her and eventually killed her. During the trial, it was revealed that Joel had shot Glee multiple times at close range, and that she had recognized him as a friend of Dana's who had visited the family a month earlier. After killing Glee, Joel reloaded his gun and put on new gloves, then waited for Dale to arrive, whom he also murdered. On May 27, 1998, after an 8-month trial, the jury delivered a finding Dana Ewell and Joel guilty on all charges. However, they could not agree on the sentencing. 2 votes saved Joel from the death penalty, while Dana escaped the death penalty by just 1 vote. In the end, both received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Dana was imprisoned at Corcoran State Prison, 50 miles south of Fresno. He was among inmates like Charles Manson. His grandmother, whom he stole from, died in 1999. Dana claims to have undergone a spiritual transformation and become a Christian while in prison. Joel was imprisoned at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. Meanwhile, Jack Pond pursued a career in law, becoming an attorney. Monica Zent broke up with Dana, finished law school, and established a successful law practice. Although Monica was thoroughly investigated, no evidence connected her to the crime. The only suspicious aspects were her initial unwillingness to cooperate and that some of the funds were used to help pay for her law school expenses. Dana Ewell's actions can be summed up by 3 words: greed, entitlement, and heartlessness. His extreme desire for wealth led him to manipulate and betray those closest to him, ultimately leading to the tragic deaths of his family members. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Carrie Leah Farver. Carrie Leah Farver was born on November 30, 1974 in Macedonia, Nebraska, USA. After going through many relationships, she raised her son Maxwell alone. Carrie Leah loved her son very much. Carrie Leah spent a month in bed due to severe depression. Her mother, Nancy Rainey, helped take care of her son Maxwell. The complicated relationship with Maxwell's father along with the difficult living conditions caused Carrie Leah, a young woman of 20 years old, to fall into an unstable psychological state. Doctors diagnosed Carrie Leah with bipolar disorder. People with bipolar disorder often have 2 opposite psychological states. One moment they can feel overly excited, energetic and friendly, but then they can fall into a state of depression, frustration, and helplessness. This disease causes them a lot of difficulties in daily life. However, in the early 2000s, Carrie Leah's doctor found an effective treatment that allowed Carrie Leah to live a normal life. In the fall of 2012, Carrie Leah received a lucrative job offer in nearby Omaha, an opportunity she couldn't refuse. Carrie Leah accepted the offer. However, her son, Maxwell, was in middle school and didn't want to change his familiar surroundings, so Maxwell decided to stay with his grandmother in Macedonia. One day in November 2012, Carrie Leah met Dave Kropa at the auto repair shop where he worked. When Dave looked at Carrie Leah's Ford Explorer, he realized that he really liked this woman. Carrie Leah was showing Dave something inside the car, and they stood close to each other, and there was a little tension. Not long after, Dave and Carrie Leah went on a date. Carrie Leah went to Dave's house. A while later, a woman named Liz called Dave a lot and texted him. Then Liz went to Dave's house to pick up something he had left for her. Dave explained to Carrie Leah that Liz Gollier was the first person Dave met online in 2012. Liz, born in 1975 in Michigan, initially told Dave that she was not looking for a serious relationship because she was a mother and needed to spend most of her time with her children. In Dave and Liz's relationship, they had few topics to talk about, and their relationship was mainly physical. After a while, Liz began to worry about what Dave was doing when she was not around, as well as who he was seeing. Dave often reminded her that they were in an open relationship and that she should not worry. He also insisted that Liz was free to date other men. However, Liz was not happy with this and began to bother Dave more and more. Liz also felt jealous of Dave's children and their mother, Amy, because she could not understand the close relationship they had after the breakup. Eventually, Liz's actions upset Dave, and he decided to break up with her. Carrie Leah sympathized with Dave, as everyone had relationships in the past, and Carrie Leah did not let that affect their relationship, but Liz was clearly upset to see a strange woman in Dave's house. Liz, feeling that Dave was increasingly distancing himself from her, wrote text messages, emails, and called Dave. However, Dave would not stop seeing Carrie Leah or anyone else because of Liz. 2 weeks after moving to her new job, Carrie Leah began dating Dave. Carrie Leah and Dave began spending more time together. Dave felt comfortable with Carrie Leah around. Carrie Leah said that she was not looking for a serious relationship, but just wanted to enjoy the good times together. In December 2015, Liz was shot. Liz probably guessed who it was. Luckily, the wound was not fatal. Liz thought, "This can't go on any longer, I have to do something." At 9:45 a.m. at work, Dave suddenly received a text message from Carrie Leah. In the message, Carrie Leah expressed her desire to live with Dave forever. The content of the message made Dave feel confused and surprised, because he did not understand the reason for Carrie Leah's sudden change. Because before, they had discussed and agreed that both of them would not rush into a binding relationship. Dave gently replied to Carrie Leah that he was not ready for this big change. Carrie Leah's response was very unpleasant. When Dave returned to the apartment, he found that all of Carrie Leah's belongings that she had brought were gone. This made him think that Carrie Leah had left him. On the same day, Carrie Leah deleted him from her Facebook friend list. Although it seemed like everything was over, it was not. Dave began receiving a series of text messages and emails from Carrie Leah, which were full of curses and threats to ruin Dave's life. The messages were numerous and all of them were rude. In addition, Carrie Leah did not show up for work. The strange messages from Carrie Leah were not only sent to Dave, but also to her mother and 15-year-old son. In May 2013, Carrie Leah posted a lengthy post on her personal Facebook page, in which she wrote, she had answered enough questions to prove to everyone that she had had enough. You can either believe that she was a girl, or leave her alone. She quit her volunteer job and she was fed up with people giving her a hard time. She just didn't want to go home right now. She was a grown woman, and if she wanted to leave home, she had every right to do so. Sorry for hurting everyone. Carrie Leah then remained absent for a while. Her mother realized something was wrong when Carrie Leah missed her own birthday, Max's birthday, and other family celebrations. Finally, when her father passed away. After a while, Liz Gollier began receiving messages from Carrie Leah. In those messages, Carrie Leah criticized and insulted Liz, even threatened Liz to stay away from Dave. To understand Carrie Leah's strange behavior, Liz contacted Dave. He said he was also in a similar situation. Carrie Leah sent him many messages and emails, in which Carrie Leah accused Dave of all kinds of wrongdoing, called him a liar, and promised to avenge the pain he had caused Carrie Leah. Gradually, the messages from Carrie Leah became more threatening, with confusing content and grammatical errors. Carrie Leah's mother insists that her daughter is not a hot-tempered person and has always been very careful in writing letters and documents. Carrie Leah pays attention to spelling and presentation. Is her bipolar disorder relapsing and developing into something more serious? After Carrie Leah's confusing actions, all the evidence points to Carrie Leah having psychological difficulties. Liz and Dave often receive hundreds of text messages and emails, even when they are together. Their phones constantly buzz with messages, which makes them both uncomfortable. Although they continue to date, Dave feels uncomfortable around Liz. She becomes more and more demanding, despite always insisting that Liz is fine with their no-strings-attached relationship. In January 2013, Dave found Carrie Leah's car in his front yard. Dave called the police and reported the incident. The police came to check the car and found no suspicious signs. The police then turned the car over to Carrie Leah's parents. Carrie Leah continued to text Dave and Liz. Carrie Leah even started sending pictures of Dave's children and threatening to harm them. As time went on, Carrie Leah continued to stalk them. Liz became increasingly jealous, made Dave angry and tired of the situation, and finally decided to end the relationship with Liz. In August 2013, Liz reported a fire at her house, which killed all of her pets, including a snake, a cat, and 2 dogs. Liz told the police that Carrie Leah had repeatedly threatened her through text messages and emails. So she suspected Carrie Leah of starting the fire. The police seized Dave and Liz's cell phones. Someone damaged Dave's auto repair shop and threw a brick through the window. Dave felt threatened, so he bought a gun to protect himself. After a while, Amy Flora, Dave's ex-wife, also began receiving threatening messages from Carrie Leah, because Dave often spent time with the children and met Amy. The police became suspicious for reasons that were hard to understand. Dave had only dated Carrie Leah for less than 2 weeks, but had been following him and his ex-girlfriends for 3 years. Meanwhile, Carrie Lee's family had not seen her for 3 years, and were trying to find her, using every method possible. In 2015, these efforts paid off. Police officers Ryan Avis and Jim Doty volunteered to investigate Carrie Leah Farver's disappearance. However, they found no evidence that Carrie Leah was alive. It was unusual for an adult to pack up and leave without spending any money. No one had seen her, and no one had heard her voice. This was very strange. With the assistance of Anthony Kawa, digital forensics administrator at the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office, police analyzed the contents of Dave and Liz's phones. In 2013, Anthony reported that Carrie Leah Farver had sent more than 50,000 text messages and 15,000 emails to Dave over the course of 3 years. Anthony also said that those impersonating Carrie Leah were becoming more sophisticated in their operations, trying to hide their IP addresses and real identities. It seems that someone knew what they were doing and had access to various computer programs. In December 2015, Liz Gollier contacted the police to report that she had been shot in the leg outside her home. She determined that the attacker was not Carrie Leah but Dave's ex-wife Amy Flora. Furthermore, Dave had a missing gun that Amy may have taken. It is possible that Amy was behind Carrie Lee's disappearance. A clue in the investigation indicates that people associated with Dave were being harassed. It is possible that Amy, having had a difficult life after breaking up with Dave, the father of her children, decided to take revenge and eliminate all rivals, and the relationship between Dave and Amy was still quite good. The children together brought them closer, and Carrie Leah clearly hindered their reunion. The police quickly questioned Amy, but surprisingly, Amy had an alibi. She was not at Liz's house when the shooting occurred, and this was confirmed by several people. Because there was no hard evidence, Amy was not arrested. Experts processed the data from Liz's cell phone and discovered important information. Anthony discovered fake email addresses with different variations of the name Carrie Leah. In addition, Anthony found an application that Carrie Leah used to schedule messages to be sent at certain times. This could explain why Liz and Dave received messages from Carrie Leah at the same time. Anthony began to suspect Liz Gollier. The answer became clear when Liz's fingerprints were compared to those found on the steering wheel of Carrie Lee's car, and they matched perfectly. The culprit was revealed. The killer has been here for years without anyone knowing. The case needs to be solved as soon as possible. The police want to catch Liz red-handed, so they plan to frame Liz. The police decide to make up a story about believing Liz, with Amy still being the main suspect. Liz takes the bait. Liz is extremely happy because she can finally get rid of another rival who is hindering Liz's happiness with Dave. Soon after, Liz gives the police an email that she says is from Amy. In the email, Amy admits to kidnapping Carrie Leah and includes many details about the incident. The confession in the email states that Carrie Leah was stabbed in the stomach or chest before being dumped. In addition, the email contains information about Carrie Lee's car and home address that no one else knows. The police say that Liz has provided information that only the real culprit would know. The email messages clearly indicated that the crime had taken place in a car, so the police decided to re-examine Carrie Lee's car. After the police removed the upholstery and fabric, they discovered blood stains belonging to Carrie Leah, who had gone missing. Liz had created fake messages on Carrie Lee's behalf without raising suspicion. According to the investigation, Liz Gollier dated both Dave and a man named Garrett. Garrett lived at the IP address identified as the source of the messages under Carrie Lee's name. When talking to Garrett, the police discovered that he had been in a long-term relationship with Shawnana Gollier, known to many as Liz. Garrett had invited Liz to live with his children after a fire. However, their relationship became complicated and strained when they lived together, with Garrett having to care for Liz's children while she was away. Garrett was surprised to hear from police that Liz had spent 40 to 50 hours a week impersonating the missing woman Carrie Leah. Liz's room was a mess, but no significant evidence was found. However, police did find several cell phones and electronic devices in the last room she stayed in. In late December 2016, Shanana Gollier, known as Liz, was charged with first-degree murder. Liz's attorney, James Martin Davis, hopes the case will fail because Carrie Lee's body has not been found, the murder weapon has not been found, and Liz has not pleaded guilty. There is no evidence to prove that Carrie Leah is dead. The defense team decides to hold a new trial, with Liz's guilt decided by a judge. Electronic evidence was presented along with physical evidence. The prosecution asserted that the amount of blood found on the passenger seat of Carrie Lee's car was consistent with Liz's confession. Police analyzed the memory card that Liz had been using when Carrie Leah went missing. The memory card was on Dave's tablet. Police recovered deleted images, including a photo of a human foot with a Chinese symbol tattoo. The foot belonged to a man who had died many years earlier. There was also a tattoo that Carrie Lee's mother identified as Carrie Leah. The photo was used to confirm Liz's guilt. The judge found Shauna Gollier, also known as Liz, guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to life in prison without parole. Additionally, Liz was convicted of arson in August 2013, a fire that not only destroyed her home but also killed her pet. Liz was sentenced to an additional 20 years in prison. She is currently incarcerated at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women and maintains her innocence. Carrie Lee's son Maxwell has followed in his mother's footsteps by becoming a computer programmer. Maxwell graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in software engineering and data science and is married.